Beneath the parched plains of what is now modern-day Pakistan and Western India lie the silent remnants of one of humanity's first great civilizations. A civilization older than Egypt's pyramids, more advanced in urban planning than many that followed, and yet we know so little about it. The Indus Valley. Civilization, Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, names that echo like whispers from the dawn of history. Streets laid out in perfect grids, plumbing systems millennia ahead of their time, and a script carved into stone that no one alive can read. Who were these people? How did they build such wonders, only to vanish without a trace? Why do their symbols remain stubbornly undeciphered, as if guarding secrets meant never to be revealed? Some believe famine or floods erased them. Others suggest trade wars, invasions, or something far stranger. Tonight, we'll walk their empty streets, examine their cryptic seals, and explore the mysteries they left behind. Are we ready to uncover what the sands of time have tried to bury? So sit back, relax, and let's dive deep into the forgotten world of the Indus Valley Civilization, where answers are few and questions never end. The sun sets low over the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro, casting long shadows across weathered bricks that have withstood nearly 5,000 years of time. The silence here is overwhelming, an ancient stillness broken only by the whispering wind threading through the remnants of narrow streets. On these walls once stood vibrant cities teeming with life. On these very stones, artisans carved symbols unlike any the world had ever seen, symbols that promised a glimpse into their minds, their beliefs, their world. Yet today, those symbols are as mute as the ruins themselves. This is the mystery of the Indus Valley script, an entire system of writing that appeared suddenly, flourished, and then, just as suddenly, vanished. Carved into seals of steatite, etched into copper tablets, and stamped on pottery, these markings are among the earliest known attempts at written communication. Some show animals, unicorn-like figures, bulls, elephants, alongside sequences of abstract signs, lines, and curves. To the modern eye, they are fragments of meaning frozen in time. To scholars, they are a locked door with no key. The Indus script first emerged around 2600 BC, during the height of the Indus Valley Civilization. At its peak, this was one of the great cradles of humanity, a society that built sophisticated cities with grid-like streets, underground drainage systems, standardized weights, and evidence of far-reaching trade networks. Yet for all their achievements, their voice, their thoughts preserved in writing, remains beyond our grasp. Unlike the cuneiform tablets of Mesopotamia or the hieroglyphs of Egypt, no bilingual inscriptions have been found to help us decode them. No Rosetta Stone to bridge the silence. Mainstream theories propose that the script was primarily used for administrative or economic purposes, perhaps recording trade, ownership, or ritual practices. Many of the symbols appear on small seals, likely used to mark goods in commerce. But the brevity of these inscriptions, most contain only a handful of characters, makes decipherment exceedingly difficult. Are these truly words, names, religious invocations? Or are they something else entirely? Mnemonic devices meant for those already in the know? Decades of research have brought us closer, yet no consensus has been reached. Some linguists argue the script represents a full writing system, perhaps encoding a language akin to early Dravidian tongues. Others insist it may not be a language at all, but rather a series of non-linguistic symbols, more like a set of emblems than sentences. Then there are the unexplained anomalies. Why does the script vanish so abruptly around 1900 BC? As the great cities of the Indus declined, possibly due to shifting rivers, climate change, or declining trade, the writing disappears with them. Did the language simply evolve into oral traditions, leaving no written descendants? Or was there a deliberate erasure, a cultural collapse so profound that even its words were forgotten? Some fringe theories go further, suggesting that the script's disappearance might indicate something far stranger: outside influence, perhaps even migration or assimilation into other cultures whose records remain undiscovered. Others have speculated about a lost archive, buried beneath the silt of the Indus or hidden in yet unexcavated sites, that could one day unlock the entire code. The seals themselves invite further questions. Consider the recurring unicorn motif, a one-horned creature that does not correspond exactly to any known animal. Was it a mythical emblem, a clan symbol, a divine representation? Why is it so pervasive across hundreds of miles and centuries of use? And what of the curious lack of monumental inscriptions? Unlike Egypt, where temples and tombs proclaimed the deeds of pharaohs, the Indus civilization left no grand narratives carved in stone. Were they a society without kings, as some evidence suggests, a collective civilization that valued anonymity over individual glory? Or is this absence another clue to a mystery we have yet to understand? Archaeologists have uncovered thousands of artifacts from Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, and other sites, but the script continues to defy modern analysis. Advanced computational models have tried to find patterns, with some success, indicating a structure similar to spoken languages. Yet, without a key, we remain outsiders looking in, hearing echoes of a voice we cannot comprehend. It is perhaps this very silence that makes the Indus script so haunting. We stand amid the remains of a people who mastered urban life before much of the world had even imagined it. We can walk their streets, hold their seals in our hands, see the tools they used, and still, we cannot read their words. What did they call themselves? What gods did they worship? What stories did they tell their children as night fell over these ancient cities? As the last light fades over the Indus plains, the darkness seems to deepen the enigma. Somewhere beneath this soil, answers may still lie waiting. Perhaps a buried library of tablets, perhaps a single inscription that will bridge the gulf of millennia. Or perhaps their voice is truly lost, swallowed by time, leaving us only to wonder. What secrets remain locked in those tiny carved symbols? Are they simple marks of trade, or the final whispers of a civilization determined to hide its truths from the future? The question lingers in the night air, unanswered, urging us to keep searching. A faint light cuts through the dust of an excavation trench in the heart of Mohenjo-Daro. In the archaeologist's hand lies a small rectangular seal, no larger than a matchbox. It is carved from steatite, its surface smoothed by the touch of countless ancient fingers. Etched into it is a creature, slender, poised, and unmistakably otherworldly. A single horn rises elegantly from its forehead, curling slightly at the tip. Beneath the animal, a series of tiny symbols march in deliberate order, silent as ever. This is the so-called unicorn seal, one of the most enigmatic artifacts of the Indus Valley Civilization. Discovered in the early 20th century, the unicorn seal has since become one of the most iconic images of the Indus world. Hundreds of similar seals have been unearthed, spread across sites that once formed a vast network of cities, towns, and trade outposts. Each one depicts the same enigmatic creature, always in profile, always with that single, curved horn. Some show it standing before what appears to be a ceremonial object, a brazier, a stand, perhaps even a ritualistic filter. Others pair it with the same undeciphered script that has long defied scholars. At first glance, the unicorn might seem purely mythical. After all, no known species matches this depiction exactly. Yet the consistency of its portrayal across such a wide geographic area suggests it held deep significance to the people of the Indus. What did it mean? Was it a religious symbol, a totem of power, or perhaps the emblem of a ruling dynasty? Mainstream scholars have offered cautious explanations. Some suggest the unicorn may represent a stylized form of a bull or antelope, simplified over generations of artistic tradition. Others propose it symbolized fertility, prosperity, or divine protection, concepts often associated with animals in ancient cultures. The object before which it stands, they argue, could be an incense burner or sacrificial altar, linking the seal to ceremonial practices. But the questions multiply as soon as we look closer. Why is this single-horned creature so dominant, appearing on more seals than any other animal in the Indus corpus? Why do we see so little variation in its design, as though it adhered to strict guidelines or conventions? Could this indicate a shared belief system spanning hundreds of miles and centuries? Some researchers have turned to linguistics for answers, hoping the accompanying symbols might provide context. Yet, without a deciphered script, interpretations remain speculative. Was the unicorn a word, a name, or even a title encoded in the pictorial language of the seals? If so, whose name? Whose title? Then there are the more unusual theories, those that stray beyond traditional scholarship. Some have linked the unicorn seal to distant legends of one-horned beasts, tales found not only in South Asia but across the ancient world. Could this Indus creature be the earliest inspiration for the unicorn myths that later emerged in Mesopotamia, Persia, and beyond? Others have suggested the animal was never meant to depict reality at all, but instead symbolized a concept: unity, singularity, or transcendence, an idea made flesh in a form we no longer recognize. Still, the most tantalizing mystery may lie in the role these seals played. Were they mere trademarkers, pressed into clay to denote ownership of goods? Or were they talismans, carrying sacred meaning as they traveled along the trade routes that connected the Indus with Mesopotamia and ancient Persia? Intriguingly, seals bearing Indus-like motifs have been found as far west as Mesopotamian sites. Evidence, perhaps, of cultural exchange or shared symbolism across vast distances. And what of the brazier-like object before which the unicorn often stands? Some have argued it represents a ritual filter used in Vedic-era Soma ceremonies, drawing a tenuous thread between the Indus people and later traditions of sacred drink in South Asia. Others dismiss this as conjecture, noting the chronological gap between the Indus and early Vedic cultures. Yet the resemblance lingers, unsettling in its persistence. As we examine the unicorn seal under modern light, we see more than just an image. We see a bridge to a world whose inner life remains hidden. Its lines are simple, but within them lies a profound enigma, the mark of a people whose thoughts, beliefs, and identities we still cannot name. Was this creature a god they worshipped, a clan emblem worn with pride, or a silent guardian of a wisdom long lost to time? Standing amid the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro, one cannot help but feel the weight of this question. These seals were not made casually. They were crafted with care, standardized in size, meticulously engraved. They mattered to someone, to thousands of someones, across generations. And yet, like their cities, like their language, their meaning has dissolved into obscurity. Perhaps, buried beneath the Indus silt, there lies an artifact that will one day reveal their secret, a cache of seals with explanatory inscriptions, or a forgotten tablet linking symbol to sound. Or perhaps the truth is forever beyond our reach, a story erased by time itself. What did the people of the Indus see in this one-horned creature? Was it a mere image, or the emblem of a civilization's soul? The unicorn seal stares back at us across millennia, its single horn raised like a question mark, daring us to answer. And so far, we cannot. Deep within the storerooms of an archaeological museum in South Asia lies a small, unassuming artifact, barely 3 inches across, fashioned from a pale, weathered steatite. At first glance, it is like many other Indus seals, compact, detailed, and inscribed with symbols no one alive can read. But look closer, and something remarkable emerges. Seated cross-legged at its center is a human figure, broad-chested, adorned with bangles, wearing a tall horned headdress. Surrounding this figure are animals, an elephant, a tiger, a rhinoceros, and beneath the throne-like seat, a pair of deer. The figure's eyes are calm, almost closed, as though in meditation. This is the so-called Proto-Shiva seal, one of the most debated images from the Indus Valley Civilization. Unearthed at Mohenjo-Daro in the 1920s, the seal has captured the imagination of scholars and spiritualists alike. To many, it appears to depict an early form of the Hindu god Shiva, specifically as Pashupati, Lord of Beasts. The horned headdress, the yogic posture, the animals flanking the figure all seem to resonate with motifs found thousands of years later in the Hindu tradition. Could this tiny seal be a direct link between the Bronze Age Indus and later Vedic beliefs? Or is this resemblance a mirage, a projection of modern ideas onto an ancient image whose meaning we no longer comprehend? Mainstream archaeology treads cautiously here. Some scholars argue that the seal may indeed represent a deity, possibly a prototype of Shiva, pointing to the figure's possible phallic symbolism, association with animals, and seated posture, elements that align, at least superficially, with later Hindu iconography. They note that certain aspects of Indus culture, like the reverence for animals and fertility symbols, may have influenced subsequent South Asian religious traditions. Yet others warn against such leaps. Without deciphered texts, they argue, we cannot know what this figure meant to the people who carved it. The horned headdress could simply be a ceremonial headdress, the animals mere decorative elements, the posture a coincidence. To assume it represents Shiva is, they say, to risk rewriting history based on patterns we want to see rather than evidence we have. Still, the mysteries surrounding this figure refuse to fade. Why is it so unlike other human depictions from the Indus? Most Indus art avoids overt representations of deities or rulers. Its motifs are abstract, symbolic, and restrained. This seal, by contrast, shows a commanding, central figure, powerful, enigmatic, and surrounded by what could be symbols of dominion over nature itself. Was this a god worshipped across the Indus world, or a local cult figure whose significance we may never fully grasp? There are other intriguing details. The figure's posture resembles later yogic positions described in Indian spiritual texts. A cross-legged seat with heels pressed together, hands resting on knees. Could this imply that meditation or ritualized bodily discipline existed in the Indus Valley millennia before such practices were recorded? Or is this yet another case of modern interpretation retroactively imposing meaning? Speculative theories abound. Some suggest the Proto-Shiva figure represents not a single god, but a shamanic leader, a mediator between humans and the natural world, whose power derived from communion with animals. Others see in it echoes of ancient fertility cults, noting that many Indus artifacts emphasize generative forces, seeds, water, animals, and perhaps this virile, seated figure. A few even propose connections to distant cultures, pointing to horned figures in Mesopotamian art and across prehistoric Eurasia as evidence of a shared, long-forgotten archetype. And then there is the seal's context, or lack thereof. Found without accompanying inscriptions or related objects, it stands alone, stripped of the cultural framework that might have explained it. Was it a personal amulet, a state seal, a religious token used in rites we can no longer imagine? We cannot say. What is undeniable is the enduring fascination it exerts. For nearly a century, the Proto-Shiva seal has inspired debate not only among academics, but also among those seeking deeper spiritual connections to the ancient past. Some see in it proof of continuity, a sacred thread linking modern Hinduism to its prehistoric roots. Others regard it as a cautionary tale of how little we truly know about the Indus people, whose voices remain silent despite the brilliance of their civilization. As we return to the ruined streets of Mohenjo-Daro, the weight of this silence presses in. Here, among the foundations of a city that thrived 4 millennia ago, once walked the artisans who carved this seal. They knew its meaning. They understood its power. And yet, that knowledge has vanished, leaving only an image, a mystery, and endless questions. What did this figure mean to those who gazed upon it? Was it a god, a king, a shaman, or something entirely beyond our categories of thought? Does it represent the birth of a tradition that would shape a subcontinent, or a lost belief system erased by time? The Proto-Shiva sits cross-legged still, unblinking, as if guarding its secret. And until we learn to read the language of the Indus, it will continue to do just that, holding its silence across the centuries, daring us to break it. The afternoon sun glints off ancient bricks, their reddish hue softened by centuries of wind and dust. Here, at the heart of Mohenjo-Daro, lies a structure unlike any other in the ancient world. A vast, rectangular pool, sunken deep into the earth, lined with meticulously laid bricks sealed with bitumen to make it waterproof. Stone steps descend on either side into its basin, while surrounding corridors and small rooms hint at activities long vanished. This is the Great Bath, one of the most iconic and enigmatic monuments of the Indus Valley Civilization. Discovered in the 1920s, the Great Bath stands as a testament to engineering skill far ahead of its time. Measuring approximately 12 meters long, 7 meters wide, and over 2 meters deep, it was carefully designed to hold and drain large quantities of water. A sophisticated system of inlets and outlets ensured a constant flow, suggesting maintenance and reuse. Yet, as functional as it appears, the question remains, what purpose did it truly serve? Mainstream interpretations often view the Great Bath as a public bathing facility, perhaps for hygiene or recreation. But the evidence complicates this picture. The structure was not connected to domestic quarters, and its construction shows an extraordinary investment of labor and resources for what would have been, in essence, a bath. Moreover, no other building in Mohenjo-Daro, or in the wider Indus world, matches its scale or architectural prominence. It occupies a central place within the so-called Citadel Mound, a raised area that likely held structures of civic or ritual importance. Could this have been more than a place to cleanse the body? Many scholars believe the Great Bath had a ceremonial or religious function. Across cultures, water often symbolizes purification, renewal, and the boundary between the human and the divine. The careful sealing of its floor, the controlled access via stairways, and the adjoining rooms, possibly used for changing, support the idea of ritual immersion. Was this a site where individuals were purified before significant rites? A place where leaders or priests enacted symbolic acts of rebirth? Or did it host communal ceremonies binding the city's inhabitants together through shared tradition? Theories diverge, and with each, new questions arise. Some researchers suggest the Great Bath might have been linked to fertility rituals, drawing parallels with later traditions in South Asia where water plays a central role in sacred rites. Others propose that it served as a political stage, a place where elite authority was demonstrated through exclusive access to sacred water. Still others speculate that it functioned as a symbolic center of the city itself, a physical manifestation of the life-giving rivers on which the civilization depended. Then there are the more speculative ideas, those that hover at the edges of conventional archaeology. Could the Great Bath have been used for initiatory practices, where participants underwent transformative experiences in water? Some point to the structure's secluded yet monumental design as evidence of restricted, possibly esoteric use. There are even those who wonder whether its significance extended beyond the spiritual, a place where astronomical or seasonal events were marked through ceremonies we no longer understand. Whatever its purpose, the Great Bath reflects a society that placed extraordinary importance on order, cleanliness, and possibly the sacred. Its builders mastered hydraulic engineering at a time when many parts of the world still struggled with basic urban planning. The effort required to create and maintain such a structure suggests it was not built for mere utility. It carried meaning, perhaps central to the identity of Mohenjo-Daro itself. And yet, like so much of the Indus Valley, its meaning is cloaked in silence. There are no inscriptions naming the gods worshipped here, no surviving texts describing the rituals performed within its walls. All we have are bricks, steps, and a hollow basin, an empty stage where once, perhaps, the most profound moments of a civilization unfolded. Standing at the edge of the Great Bath today, one feels a strange resonance. The air is dry, the basin empty, but the space holds a gravity difficult to explain. Did thousands gather here to witness sacred events? Did quiet processions of priests descend those steps at dawn, bearing offerings to unseen deities? Or did an ordinary citizen once stand here, immersed in cool water, feeling reborn beneath an open sky? We cannot know. The answers remain hidden, scattered in fragments beneath layers of earth and time. Perhaps, buried beneath this city, there are clues yet to be found, a cache of artifacts, a mural, a single inscription that might finally reveal the truth. Until then, the Great Bath endures as a question in stone, its silence as eloquent as any words could ever be. What secret did the people of Mohenjo-Daro place in this pool of water? Was it simply a bath, or the heart of their spiritual world? The Great Bath waits, patient as always, inviting us to look deeper, into its depths, and into the enigma of a civilization that vanished but left behind wonders we are only beginning to understand. The streets of Mohenjo-Daro are eerily quiet now, but long ago they bustled with life. Merchants calling out from market stalls, children playing in sunlit courtyards, the rhythmic clatter of carts on brick-paved roads. Today, among these silent ruins, archaeologists have uncovered a discovery as unsettling as it is perplexing: human remains scattered across the ancient city. In alleyways, inside homes, and clustered together in strange formations, dozens of skeletons have been found. Some lying face down, others sprawled as though they had fallen mid-flight. These have come to be known as the mass graves of Mohenjo-Daro, a haunting clue to the mystery of the Indus Valley Civilization's decline. First unearthed in the early 20th century, these skeletal remains immediately stirred speculation. Why were so many individuals found unburied, their bodies seemingly abandoned? The people of the Indus were meticulous in life. Careful urban planners, skilled artisans, organized traders. Would they have left their dead unceremoniously strewn about without reason? One of the most striking finds was a group of nearly 40 individuals discovered near what may have been a central street. Their bones showed no signs of formal burial rites, no evidence of coffins or cremation, practices thought to have existed in the region at the time. To early excavators, this suggested a sudden catastrophic event. Mainstream theories have proposed several explanations. Some argue that these were victims of flooding, a disaster that could have swept through the city, drowning inhabitants and leaving their bodies behind as waters receded. The Indus River, unpredictable and prone to shifting courses, was both the lifeblood and the potential destroyer of the civilization. Others point to disease, perhaps a virulent epidemic that overwhelmed the population, leaving corpses unburied in its wake. Yet not all of the evidence fits neatly into these narratives. Many of the skeletons show no signs of trauma consistent with drowning, nor clear markers of epidemic disease. Moreover, the remains are not all from the same layer of excavation. They span different phases of the city's occupation. Were these truly victims of a single cataclysm, or are we seeing snapshots of a more complex, drawn-out decline? Another theory casts a darker shadow. Some researchers have suggested that violence may have played a role: conflict, invasion, or internal strife leading to the city's downfall. A few skeletons bear injuries that could indicate blunt force trauma, though others appear unmarked, as if death came swiftly and without struggle. Could Mohenjo-Daro have fallen to outside attackers? The archaeological record, however, offers little support for large-scale warfare. No burned fortifications, no layers of destruction typical of sieges. And then there is the most controversial hypothesis, one that has sparked fascination and skepticism alike. In the mid-20th century, some researchers claimed that certain skeletons exhibited unusually high levels of radiation, leading to sensational theories of an ancient atomic blast or catastrophic event beyond natural explanation. Subsequent studies have largely dismissed this, attributing the readings to later contamination and natural background radiation. Yet the idea lingers in popular imagination, fueled by the mystery of a civilization that seemed to vanish without leaving clear answers. What remains undeniable is the unsettling picture these bones paint. Whether victims of flood, disease, conflict, or something we have yet to fathom, they are a stark reminder of the vulnerability even the most advanced societies face. Mohenjo-Daro was no simple village. It was a city of tens of thousands, with orderly streets, advanced sanitation, and extensive trade links. And yet, like its contemporaries in Mesopotamia and Egypt, it could not escape the inexorable forces of change, nature, or fate. Standing over one of these excavation sites, where human forms lie preserved in the dust, one cannot help but feel the weight of untold stories. Who were these individuals? Farmers, merchants, children? Did they know the end was coming? Did they fight it or simply succumb to forces beyond their control? The silence of their bones is profound and perhaps deliberate, a final enigma from a people who left no written chronicles of their fate. Somewhere beneath the sands of Sind, there may yet be answers, buried records, artifacts, or even undisturbed graves that could illuminate the final days of Mohenjo-Daro. Until then, the image endures, a city of great achievement, abandoned to time, and the skeletal remains of its inhabitants scattered like whispers of a forgotten tragedy. What truly happened here? Was it nature's wrath, human conflict, or a chain of events we have yet to piece together? The dead of Mohenjo-Daro do not speak, but their presence compels us to ask, and to keep searching for a truth that may still lie hidden beneath the earth. Beneath the shifting sands of the Indus Plains, archaeologists have uncovered graves that should hold the remains of the dead, yet they do not. At sites like Harappa and Kalibangan, burial pits have been found carefully constructed, lined with mud bricks or marked with pottery offerings, only to reveal, upon excavation, an unsettling absence. No skeletons, no human remains, just empty spaces where the bodies of the departed should have rested for eternity. These are the so-called burials without bones, one of the most perplexing puzzles of the Indus Valley Civilization. At first glance, these graves appear ordinary. Many contain ceramics, painted jars placed deliberately, sometimes in symmetrical patterns. Others hold beads, ornaments, or tools, suggesting they once served as offerings to accompany the deceased into the afterlife. Yet, when the soil is cleared, what emerges is silence. Objects without owners, tributes to no visible dead. How do we explain a burial that holds no body? Mainstream archaeology has offered several possible answers. Some scholars argue that these are symbolic burials, cenotaphs created for individuals whose bodies could not be recovered, perhaps lost to floods, predators, or distant lands. In this interpretation, the empty grave served as a spiritual anchor, a place where the living could honor those they could not physically inter. Others propose that environmental factors may have erased the remains. The soils of the Indus region are highly alkaline, conditions that can hasten the decomposition of bone. Over thousands of years, even skeletal remains might disintegrate entirely, leaving only the grave goods behind. But this explanation falters when compared to other graves in the region that have preserved bones under similar conditions. Why would some graves retain their occupants while others are completely void? The mystery deepens when we consider the deliberate care evident in these empty burials. Many were clearly marked and maintained, suggesting they held importance long after their creation. Were these truly memorials for absent bodies, or did they serve another, less understood purpose? Some researchers see in them the echoes of complex ritual practices. Could these graves have represented a spiritual offering, a sacrifice not of flesh, but of intention? Perhaps the absence of a body was itself symbolic, an acknowledgement of forces unseen, or a belief that the essence of the person had moved on, leaving no need for the physical form. In this light, the empty grave becomes a statement of faith rather than a failure of preservation. More speculative theories go further still. Some have suggested these sites might have been part of communal rites, places where objects, not people, were buried to invoke fertility, protection, or divine favor. Others see in them signs of a society grappling with profound change, rituals evolving, traditions shifting, leaving behind enigmatic traces that resist our modern categories of funerary or sacred. There is also the unsettling possibility that the emptiness is deliberate in another sense, that these were burials intended to deceive or obscure. Were they decoys, designed to protect the true resting places of important individuals from desecration? Or could they reflect social divisions, memorials granted to those deemed worthy of remembrance, even in absence? And yet, despite all these theories, we remain confronted by the stark simplicity of the evidence. Pits dug, offerings placed, and nothing within. It is as if the dead themselves have vanished, leaving behind only the shadow of a ritual. Standing over one of these hollow graves, the questions multiply. Who was meant to lie here? Did mourners gather at this spot millennia ago, speaking words we will never know, believing their loved one's spirit would find its way home? Or are we imposing our own assumptions on a practice that had nothing to do with death as we understand it? The Indus Valley Civilization, for all its sophistication, left no written texts to guide us, no prayers, no myths, no records of rites performed in these places. All we have are silent artifacts and the spaces they occupy. Perhaps the answer lies in a meaning so foreign to us that we cannot even frame the right question. And so the burials without bones remain what they have always been, empty and yet full of mystery. Each one a silent reminder that the past is not always knowable, that some truths may be deliberately hidden or simply lost to time. Why did they bury offerings without bodies? Was it a gesture of remembrance, a ritual of belief, or something we cannot yet comprehend? The earth keeps its secret well, holding on to a story we are still struggling to uncover, an absence that speaks louder than any presence ever could. In a dimly lit display case at the National Museum of Karachi, a small stone figure gazes out with an expression at once detached and commanding. Carved from steatite and standing barely 7 inches tall, it is a portrait of an unknown man, or perhaps something more than a man. His eyelids are half lowered, as though in contemplation or quiet authority. A neatly groomed beard frames his face, each curl meticulously incised. Across his shoulders drapes a cloak patterned with trefoil motifs, once inlaid with red pigment, suggesting both wealth and symbolism. On his right arm, a narrow band encircles his bicep, perhaps a bracelet, perhaps a mark of rank. This is the so-called Priest King of Mohenjo-Daro, one of the most iconic yet enigmatic artifacts of the Indus Valley Civilization. Unearthed in the 1920s from a building on the Citadel Mound, the figure immediately captured the imagination of archaeologists. Who was this man? Was he truly a priest, a king, or something else entirely? The title, Priest King, was bestowed by early scholars who assumed that such a sophisticated civilization must have been led by a powerful elite, possibly combining spiritual and political authority. The trefoil pattern on his cloak, they argued, hinted at ceremonial use, while his composed, aloof demeanor evoked images of rulers in distant lands. Yet the evidence to support these claims is tenuous at best. Nowhere in the archaeological record of the Indus do we find clear signs of kingship. No palaces, no royal tombs, no inscriptions proclaiming dynastic rule. The cities of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro seem to have been remarkably egalitarian in their layout, lacking the monumental hierarchy seen in Mesopotamia or Egypt. Could this priest king have been no king at all? Some scholars now suggest the figure may have been merely a portrait of a wealthy merchant, a respected elder, or even an unknown deity. The building where it was found contained no definitive evidence of ritual activity, and the title may reflect more of our assumptions than their reality. Was he a leader in life, or a symbolic figure meant to embody ideals we can no longer grasp? The ambiguity deepens when we examine the statue itself. His half-closed eyes have been interpreted as a meditative gaze, leading some to link him to spiritual practices that might have predated later Indian traditions. Others note the stern set of his jaw, reading authority rather than introspection. The trefoil motif on his cloak, too, has fueled speculation. Found in other Indus artifacts, it may have had religious significance, or perhaps it was simply a decorative pattern stripped of sacred meaning by the passage of time. More speculative theories cast the figure in even broader contexts. Some have argued that the priest king could represent a mythological archetype rather than an actual person, a guardian of the city, a divine mediator between humans and gods. Others have drawn comparisons with figures from faraway cultures, suggesting the Indus may have shared iconographic themes with Mesopotamia or even ancient Persia. These parallels are intriguing, but remain unproven, tantalizing hints of a world more interconnected than we once believed. There is also the possibility that this figure was part of something larger, a fragment of a more elaborate sculpture, a lone survivor of art lost to time. If so, what did the complete work depict? A council of figures? A deity enthroned among symbols of power? We may never know. What makes the priest king so haunting is not what it tells us, but what it withholds. Here is a face from 4,000 years ago, carved with skill and intention, yet stripped of its context. We cannot hear his voice, cannot read his name, cannot know the world he inhabited beyond these carved features. And yet, in his stillness, there is an undeniable presence, as if he carries within him the weight of a civilization's silence. Standing before him today, we are left to wonder, who shaped this figure, and for what purpose? Was he revered, feared, loved, or merely observed? Does he represent a single individual, or is he the embodiment of ideals we have lost to time? The priest king of Mohenjo-Daro remains as inscrutable as the script of his people, a solitary witness to a world that vanished without explanation. His eyes, half closed, seem to look past us, beyond us, as if guarding a truth we are not yet ready to understand. And so he waits, unyielding in his silence, daring us to ask the question that has no answer. What story lies behind that calm, unblinking gaze? On the western coast of India, near the village of Lothal, lies a rectangular basin carved from ancient stone, its edges weathered by centuries of sun and monsoon. Today, it is silent, an empty cavity measuring roughly 37 meters by 22 meters, surrounded by brick platforms and channels that once carried water in and out. But 4,000 years ago, this place may have thrummed with activity. The creak of wooden hulls, the splash of oars, the shouts of merchants loading cargo bound for distant lands. Archaeologists call it the Dockyard of Lothal, and it is one of the most extraordinary and puzzling features of the Indus Valley Civilization. When British archaeologists first excavated the site in the 1950s, they were astonished. The basin was unlike anything they had seen in ancient South Asia, deep, carefully lined with kiln-fired bricks, and connected to what appeared to be a network of spillways and sluice gates. The design suggested a level of engineering sophistication far beyond what was expected of a Bronze Age culture. Could this have been a harbor for ocean-going vessels? Evidence that the Indus people were not just farmers and traders, but master seafarers engaged in long-distance maritime commerce? Mainstream scholarship supports the idea that Lothal was a center of trade. Artifacts found here include beads made from carnelian, shells from distant shores, and weights conforming to a standardized system used throughout the Indus world. There is evidence of workshops producing fine ornaments, likely destined for export. Mesopotamian records from around 2000 BC mention a place called Meluha, thought by many to refer to the Indus region, with references to trade in timber, ivory, and semi-precious stones. Could Lothal's dockyard have been the very point of departure for these goods? Yet questions persist. If this was indeed a dock, where are the ships? No remnants of vessels have been found, nor clear evidence of shipbuilding infrastructure. Some scholars have argued that the so-called dockyard may have served a different purpose entirely, perhaps as an irrigation tank, a reservoir, or a structure for flood control in a region prone to seasonal inundation. Its inland location, several kilometers from the sea even in antiquity, complicates the maritime interpretation. Could tidal channels have once connected it to the Gulf of Kambat, later shifting as rivers changed course? Or was its placement always deliberate, suggesting a function we have yet to comprehend? Speculative theories add further intrigue. Some researchers propose that Lothal's basin was not merely practical but symbolic, a ceremonial water structure reflecting cosmological beliefs. The precision of its construction, the integration of drainage systems, and its prominence within the settlement layout hint at importance beyond utility. Was this a place where ritual and commerce intertwined? Where the act of launching a ship was also an offering to unseen deities of river and sea? Others have drawn connections to a wider network of ancient maritime cultures. If the Indus people maintained sea routes linking them to Mesopotamia, Oman, and possibly even beyond, what role did Lothal play in this web of exchange? Could its dockyard represent not an isolated innovation, but a node in one of the earliest known systems of global trade? And if so, why has so little direct evidence of these voyages survived? The dockyard's design itself invites fascination. The presence of a spill channel suggests the ability to regulate water levels, protecting vessels from tidal fluctuations. This implies not only advanced engineering knowledge but also a deep understanding of local hydrology. How did a civilization whose script remains undeciphered, whose political structures are still debated, achieve such technical mastery? And then there is the human element. Standing here today, amid the quiet ruins of Lothal, it is easy to imagine the lives once bound to this place. The craftsmen shaping beads in nearby workshops, The merchants tallying goods with stone weights, the sailors preparing for journeys across unpredictable seas. Did they look out at the horizon with a sense of wonder, or was seafaring merely another facet of their pragmatic world? As with so many aspects of the Indus Valley Civilization, the Dockyard of Lothal sits at the intersection of certainty and enigma. We know it existed. We can measure its dimensions, trace its channels, catalog its associated artifacts. But its true story, its purpose, its meaning, remains elusive. Was this truly one of the world's earliest harbors, a testament to a maritime culture that rivaled its contemporaries in Mesopotamia and Egypt? Or are we misreading a structure whose function belonged to a worldview entirely alien to ours? The basin lies empty now, its brick-lined walls slowly succumbing to time, yet its silence speaks volumes. Beneath the earth around Lothal, more may still wait to be uncovered. Evidence of ships, inscriptions naming rulers or gods, or clues that could confirm or overturn everything we think we know. What secrets did this dock once guard? Was it a gateway to the world or a monument to something deeper, now lost? The answers, like the tides that once may have filled this basin, have receded, but perhaps one day they will return. Beyond the citadel walls of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro stand the remains of massive brick platforms, their surfaces divided into orderly rectangles by low walls and narrow passages. To the untrained eye, they appear as little more than foundations, rows of raised floors open to the sky. But to archaeologists, these structures have long been known as the granaries of the Indus Valley Civilization. Their sheer scale is striking. Some measure nearly 50 meters in length, with evidence of air ducts beneath the floors, possibly to keep stored goods dry. Yet, as with so many aspects of this ancient world, their true purpose remains a mystery. The first excavators assumed these were storehouses for grain, inspired by parallels in later civilizations where surplus harvests were kept in centralized facilities. The Indus people were master farmers, cultivating wheat, barley, peas, and cotton along the fertile floodplains of the Indus and its tributaries. Large communal granaries would have made sense in a society of this scale, enabling surplus storage, trade, and perhaps even state-level control over food supplies. The layout of these buildings, raised on platforms to avoid flooding, seemed to support this interpretation. But closer examination complicates this seemingly straightforward conclusion. No actual grain has ever been found within these structures. Despite decades of excavation, no charred seeds, no residues, no agricultural implements definitively tied to storage have been recovered from these sites. Were the granaries emptied long ago, their contents consumed before the cities were abandoned? Or were these buildings never granaries at all? Alternative explanations have emerged over time. Some scholars suggest these so-called granaries may have served as warehouses for goods beyond food, beads, cotton textiles, or other trade commodities that fueled the Indus economy. Their proximity to what may have been administrative areas hints at a role in commerce rather than subsistence. Could these have been centers of distribution, where items were tallied, stored, and dispatched along the trade routes that linked the Indus to Mesopotamia and beyond? Others propose more ritualistic purposes. The platform's size and prominence raise the possibility that they were gathering places for collective events, perhaps linked to seasonal festivals celebrating fertility and harvest. In this view, the structures would have symbolized abundance rather than physically storing it, acting as ceremonial hubs in a society where water, earth, and sustenance were deeply intertwined. Speculative theories stretch even further. Some researchers have pointed to the air channels beneath the floors as evidence of advanced ventilation systems, suggesting that whatever these buildings contained required careful preservation, materials sensitive to moisture, heat, or decay. A few have even ventured into the realm of symbolic architecture. arguing that the structures may have embodied cosmological principles, their orderly divisions reflecting a worldview that tied earthly wealth to celestial order. Still, the absence of direct evidence keeps all these interpretations in the realm of hypothesis. Unlike Egypt, where hieroglyphs proudly declare the functions of temples and granaries alike, the Indus script remains locked, and no accompanying inscriptions have been found to clarify the purpose of these monumental platforms. All we have are bricks, thousands of them, laid with precision by hands long gone, forming structures whose meaning has slipped beyond our reach. Their very existence, however, reveals much about the people who built them. To construct on this scale required planning, organization, and labor coordination, traits of a complex and sophisticated society. Whether storing grain or goods, hosting rituals, or serving a purpose we cannot yet imagine, these structures embody the collective effort of a civilization that prized order and endurance. Standing amid the ruins of Harappa's so-called granary today, one is struck by the silence of the space. The wind sweeps through the empty corridors where perhaps once stood sacks of grain stacked high, or merchants counting their wares, or priests preparing offerings to unseen gods. The stones do not tell us which of these images is true, or whether all of them are. What were these vast platforms truly for? Were they the lifeblood of a centralized economy, ensuring stability in times of scarcity? Were they hubs of trade and prosperity, connecting the Indus to distant worlds? Or were they sacred places, where the community came together not to store food, but to honor forces greater than themselves? The answer remains buried in time, waiting, perhaps, beneath another layer of earth not yet uncovered. Until then, the granaries stand as mute witnesses to a mystery that, like so much of the Indus Valley, defies easy explanation. What secrets do these silent walls still hold, and will they ever speak again? On the windswept plains of Rajasthan, where the sands of the Thar Desert blur the horizon, lies the ancient site of Kalibangan. Today it appears as little more than a scattering of mounds and ruins, muted by time. But beneath its quiet surface lies one of the most intriguing discoveries of the Indus Valley Civilization. A series of carefully constructed fire altars, rectangular brick platforms, aligned with striking precision, each bearing traces of ash, charcoal, and burned earth. These are no random hearths. They were built with intention, arranged in rows, and placed within what seems to have been a ritual precinct. And they raise a question that has lingered for decades. What exactly happened here? First unearthed in the 1960s, the fire altars of Kalibangan immediately stood apart from the rest of the Indus world. While the civilization is known for its urban planning, drainage systems, and enigmatic seals, overt evidence of ritual practice is rare. These altars, however, suggest something different, a space dedicated not to trade or governance, but to ceremony. Each altar was rectangular, built of mud brick, and showed signs of repeated burning. Some contained shallow pits, possibly for holding offerings, while others were flanked by low platforms where participants might have stood or placed objects. Nearby, archaeologists found animal bones, hinting at possible sacrificial rites. The mainstream interpretation is that these were sites of ritual fire worship. Fire has long held a sacred role in South Asia, symbolizing purification, transformation, and a conduit between the earthly and the divine. Could Kalibangan's altars represent an early form of practices later described in Vedic texts? Ceremonial fires tended by priests, offerings cast into the flames to honor unseen gods? The alignment of the altars, some oriented toward cardinal directions, adds weight to this theory, suggesting a connection to cosmic order. Yet, as always with the Indus, certainty slips through our fingers. There are no inscriptions here to tell us who lit these fires, what prayers they might have spoken, or which deities they revered. Without texts, the interpretation of fire altars rests on context and comparison, on patterns we think we recognize. But could we be seeing only what we expect to see? Some scholars caution against linking Kalibangan too directly with later Vedic traditions, noting the significant chronological gap and the lack of definitive continuity. Perhaps these fires had nothing to do with religion as we understand it. Could they have been used for communal feasts, seasonal festivals, or even industrial purposes like pottery firing? The presence of animal bones might suggest sacrifice, or simply the remnants of meals consumed during gatherings. More speculative theories go further, proposing that the altars may have had a dual function, both practical and symbolic. In a region where agriculture depended on the fickle rains of the monsoon, fire could have played a role in rituals seeking fertility, rain, or protection from drought. Others have suggested astronomical connections, with the placement of altars marking celestial events now lost to us. Was this site a calendar in brick and flame, its fires lit in harmony with the movements of the stars? And then there is the broader question of why Kalibangan alone, among major Indus sites, yields such clear evidence of fire-centered ritual. Does this represent a local variation within a diverse civilization, or a window into practices that once spanned the Indus world but left few traces elsewhere? If so, what does that say about the spiritual life of a society often described as secular, pragmatic, and mercantile? Walking through the excavated area today, one can still see the outlines of those altars, simple, unadorned, and yet heavy with meaning. The desert wind stirs the sand across their surfaces, as though erasing and revealing them at once. It is easy to imagine the glow of firelight here millennia ago, casting flickering shadows on participants gathered in solemn purpose. Were they farmers pleading for rain? Traders giving thanks for safe journeys? Priests invoking powers we no longer name? The truth remains locked in silence. The ashes have long cooled, the voices that spoke over them are gone, and the civilization that built them has vanished. All that endures are these mute structures, aligned in the dust, inviting us to speculate, but never to know for certain. What was the true purpose of Kalibangan's fire altars? Were they the beating heart of a forgotten religion, a community's lifeline to forces beyond their control, or something altogether different, beyond our ability to imagine? The altars stand as quiet witnesses to a mystery that time has not erased, only deepened, reminding us that the Indus Valley still holds secrets we have yet to uncover. In the ruins of Lothal, not far from the enigmatic Dockyard that once connected the Indus Valley to distant lands, lies another puzzle, one that speaks not of trade and commerce, but of ritual and fire. Here, amidst the remnants of workshops and homes, archaeologists uncovered a curious arrangement: 7 brick platforms, aligned in a row, each bearing traces of intense burning. Known today as the 7 fire altars of Lothal, they add yet another layer of mystery to a civilization already shrouded in silence. The altars themselves are unassuming at first glance. Rectangular mud brick structures, modest in size, their surfaces scorched black in places by the heat of flames long extinguished. But their careful construction and placement set them apart from ordinary hearths. They were not scattered randomly across the site. They were deliberately positioned, forming a sequence that suggests ritual purpose. Within and around them, excavators found layers of ash, charred bones, possibly of animals, and fragments of pottery that may once have held offerings. What were these fires for? The most widely accepted interpretation is that they were part of a ceremonial complex, used for rites involving fire as a sacred medium. Across many ancient cultures, fire was a transformative force, consuming, purifying, connecting the human to the divine. Could these altars represent an early form of such belief, perhaps anticipating the fire-centric rituals described much later in Vedic traditions? Some scholars have drawn parallels between the Lothal altars and descriptions of multiple fire ceremonies in early Indian texts, where rows of sacred flames were maintained simultaneously to honor gods or mark significant events. Yet, as with so much of the Indus Valley Civilization, certainty remains elusive. The altars at Lothal are unique. No other major Indus site has revealed quite the same configuration. Why here, and why 7? Was the number symbolic, tied to celestial cycles, the seasons, or perhaps the 7 rivers of the Indus landscape? Or is this connection an illusion, an echo we impose on something entirely unrelated? Some have suggested a more practical interpretation, that the altars were used for industrial purposes, perhaps connected to the bead-making industry for which Lothal was famous. Beads of carnelian and semi-precious stones, produced here in remarkable quantities, often required high-temperature heating to achieve their distinctive colors. Could these altars have been specialized kilns rather than places of worship? The evidence, however, is inconclusive. While Lothal's workshops do show signs of craft production, the positioning of the 7 altars, away from the main industrial areas and in what appears to be a distinct precinct, suggests they were not merely utilitarian. More speculative theories push the mystery further. Some researchers have wondered if the altars formed part of a larger ceremonial landscape, perhaps linked to astronomical observations. Were fires lit here at particular times of the year, marking solstices, equinoxes, or other celestial events significant to the people of Lothal? The precise alignment of the altars has prompted such questions, though definitive evidence remains absent. Then there is the possibility that these fires were not offerings to gods, but to ancestors. Across many cultures, fire has been a medium through which the living connect with the dead, a means of carrying prayers, gratitude, or remembrance beyond the physical world. Could the altars of Lothal have been places where families or communities gathered to honor those who had passed, their flames serving as bridges between worlds? The charred bones found nearby might support this idea, though again, interpretation is clouded by time. Whatever their purpose, the 7 fire altars challenge the long-held view of the Indus Valley Civilization as a purely pragmatic, secular society. For decades, scholars described the Indus as a culture focused on trade, urban planning, and material life, with little evidence of the monumental temples or ostentatious religious structures found elsewhere. But here, in these simple yet deliberate constructions, we glimpse a different dimension, a community engaging with fire in a way that seems to transcend mere function. Standing at Lothal today, with the sun sinking low over the Gujarat plains, the altars appear almost spectral. The desert breeze moves softly across their surfaces, as if stirring memories of flames that once danced here, illuminating faces now lost to history. What did those fires mean to the people who lit them? Were they acts of devotion, of necessity, of hope? Did they burn for gods, for ancestors, or for reasons we cannot even imagine? The altars, like so much of the Indus Valley's legacy, remain silent. They offer no inscriptions, no explanatory carvings, no texts to decode their story. All we have are bricks and ash, fragments of a practice that refuses to reveal its full meaning. Why 7? Why here? And why, in a city so deeply connected to the material world of trade and production, do we find this quiet testament to something profoundly intangible? The 7 fire altars of Lothal stand as a reminder that, beneath the ordered streets and bustling workshops of the Indus, lay beliefs and practices we have barely begun to comprehend. Perhaps buried still in the earth around them, there are answers waiting, artifacts, patterns or alignments that could one day shed light on what these fires truly were. Until then, they remain as they are, silent, enigmatic, and endlessly compelling. What truth do these ancient flames conceal? Were they the heart of a forgotten faith, or the embers of a ritual whose purpose has long since faded? The question lingers, like smoke rising from a fire that has never fully gone out. Across the arid plains of northwestern India, where the land now lies dry and cracked beneath an unforgiving sun, traces of an ancient riverbed wind like a ghost through the desert. This is the Ghaggar-Hakra channel, believed by many to be the remnant of a mighty river once known as the Saraswati, a river praised in ancient texts as a life-giver, a goddess, and the cradle of a flourishing civilization. Today it is a landscape of silence, but beneath its sands lie the ruins of hundreds of settlements, long buried and long forgotten. What stories might they tell if they could speak? Excavations along this dried river course have revealed evidence of a vast network of Indus Valley settlements, larger in some cases than those along the Indus itself. Sites such as Kalibangan, Banawali, and Rakhigarhi show signs of urban planning, craft production, and trade, suggesting that this river once sustained a thriving heartland of the civilization. Pottery shards, beads, and mud brick structures attest to lives once lived here, in towns connected by the steady flow of water. But how could such a river, vital enough to nurture a civilization, vanish so completely? Geological studies suggest that the Saraswati's decline began around 2000 BC, when shifting tectonic activity diverted the glacier-fed waters of the Sutlej and Yamuna rivers, its primary tributaries. Without this lifeline, the great river gradually dried, leaving behind only seasonal streams and, eventually, a barren channel. To many scholars, this environmental shift helps explain the wider decline of the Indus Valley Civilization, the slow abandonment of cities, the migration of populations eastward, and the fading of a once great culture. But is this the whole story? Some argue that the Saraswati was never as grand as later traditions suggest, proposing instead that the Ghaggar-Hakra was always a modest seasonal river, and that the settlements along it relied on wells, canals, and other water management techniques rather than a powerful perennial flow. Others counter that satellite imagery shows a riverbed far too broad to have been merely seasonal, and that the sheer density of sites along its course implies a dependable water source of significant size. Which version of history is correct? The mystery deepens when we consider the cultural memory of the Saraswati. In ancient Indian texts composed centuries after the Indus cities had fallen silent, the river is described as vast, sacred, and eventually lost in the desert. Could these accounts preserve a distant echo of a real environmental catastrophe remembered across generations? Or are they poetic inventions, mythologizing a landscape that was always marginal? The overlap between archaeology, geology, and myth here is tantalizing and frustrating. Even more intriguing are the settlements themselves. Many of the Saraswati sites show evidence of continuity long after the great urban centers of Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa had declined. Did the people here adapt more successfully to changing conditions, maintaining traditions that eventually flowed into later cultures of the subcontinent? Some have argued that the Saraswati region may have served as a bridge between the urban Indus world and the rural societies that followed, preserving elements of language, ritual, and technology. If true, these lost settlements could hold the key to understanding not just the end of the Indus civilization, but its transformation. And then there are the unanswered questions. Why have so few of these sites been fully excavated, despite their importance? What lies buried beneath the dunes? Unopened graves, undeciphered inscriptions, evidence of interactions with distant lands. Could the key to unlocking the Indus script itself be hidden here, on tablets waiting in the sand? Or will these secrets vanish entirely as erosion and human activity erase what remains? Walking today along the desiccated channel of the Gagar Hakra, the silence is deceptive. Beneath your feet, under layers of sand, lie the footprints of a forgotten world. Farmers tending their fields, potters shaping clay, traders setting out with goods for lands as far away as Mesopotamia. All of it gone, leaving behind a void where a river once flowed. What happened here? Was the disappearance of the Saraswati the decisive blow to an entire civilization, or just one thread in a far more complex tapestry of change? Did its people watch the river dwindle year by year, struggling to adapt, or did they abandon it suddenly, driven by forces we cannot yet imagine? The lost Saraswati settlements remain one of the great enigmas of the ancient world. They remind us that civilizations can vanish not only through conquest or catastrophe, but also through the quiet, inexorable power of nature itself. And perhaps, as more of these sites are unearthed, they will finally answer a question that has haunted generations of scholars. What secrets still sleep beneath the sands of a river that no longer flows? In the dusty expanse of Rajasthan, where the wind carries the scent of desert earth and the horizon stretches unbroken, lies the ancient site of Kalibangan. Here, in the midst of what once was a thriving urban center of the Indus Valley Civilization, archaeologists made a discovery that continues to puzzle and fascinate. The remains of a plowed field, preserved beneath centuries of sand. Unlike anything else uncovered from this era, it offers a rare, intimate glimpse into the agricultural practices of a civilization that left no written records we can read. Yet, like so much of the Indus world, it raises more questions than it answers. The field itself is modest in size, but its significance is extraordinary. Rectangular in shape, it bears a striking pattern. Intersecting furrows running in a grid-like arrangement, oriented north-south and east-west. This dual pattern suggests a sophisticated method of cultivation, possibly allowing for multiple crops to be grown simultaneously, with one set of furrows accommodating tall plants and the other shorter varieties. To modern eyes, this might seem a simple innovation, but in 2800 BC, it represents advanced agricultural planning, indicative of a society deeply attuned to its environment. What does this reveal about the people of Kalibangan? Clearly, they were not merely urban dwellers, but skilled farmers who understood soil management, crop rotation, and perhaps even irrigation. The field lies near what was once the Saraswati River, whose seasonal floods would have enriched the land, making it fertile for wheat, barley, and pulses, the staples of the Indus diet. This suggests a deliberate integration of urban life and agriculture, a balance between city and countryside that may have been key to the civilization's prosperity. Yet, as with so many Indus discoveries, the mystery deepens on closer inspection. Why was this field so meticulously laid out? Was it simply a practical design to maximize yields, or did it carry symbolic meaning as well? Some scholars have speculated that the cross-furrow pattern might have held ritual significance, reflecting cosmological beliefs or seasonal cycles. Could the very act of plowing have been more than agricultural labor, an invocation of fertility, a ritual binding the community to the land? There are tantalizing clues that agriculture in the Indus Valley may have been infused with ritual elements. At other sites, terracotta figurines of bulls, symbols of plowing and fertility, have been found in abundance. Might these have been offerings placed in fields like this one to ensure bountiful harvests? And if so, was Kalibangan's plowed field not just a farm, but a sacred space where sustenance and spirituality intertwined? The discovery also challenges long-held assumptions about the nature of the Indus civilization itself. For decades, scholars portrayed it as a primarily urban, trade-oriented society focused on commerce rather than agrarian life. But the plowed field at Kalibangan suggests otherwise, that the roots of this civilization lay firmly in the soil, that its cities were sustained by a complex and perhaps even ideologically significant agricultural system. How much of this story have we overlooked because we cannot yet read their script? More speculative theories take the intrigue further. Some researchers have proposed that the cross-patterned field could represent early experimentation with scientific agriculture, an understanding of crop compatibility and soil conservation far ahead of its time. Others wonder if this method was unique to Kalibangan or widespread across the Indus world, its traces erased elsewhere by time and erosion. Was this field a standard model of Indus farming, or a local innovation that points to the diversity within the civilization? And then there is the lingering question of why Kalibangan, once prosperous, was eventually abandoned. Geological studies suggest that tectonic shifts altered the course of the Saraswati River, leading to water scarcity in the region. Did the people of this field witness the river's decline, watching as once fertile land turned to dust? Did they cling to their rituals, their cross furrows, their prayers to the earth, even as the lifeblood of their world slipped away? Standing at the site today, one can still trace the faint lines of the furrows in the hardened earth, a ghostly imprint of human hands that worked this land nearly 5 millennia ago. The silence here is profound. There are no tools left behind, no inscriptions to explain the farmers' methods or beliefs, only these enduring marks in the soil, speaking to a people who lived by rhythms we can scarcely comprehend. What does this field truly represent? Is it simply evidence of practical ingenuity, or a window into a worldview where farming was inseparable from faith? Does it show us how the Indus Valley thrived, or hint at why it eventually faded? The plowed field of Kalibangan endures as a quiet enigma, an agricultural relic that refuses to yield all its secrets. It reminds us that behind the grand cities and mysterious artifacts of the Indus lay lives rooted in the earth, lives that shaped and were shaped by a landscape now largely forgotten. What other traces of their world lie hidden beneath the sands, waiting to be uncovered? And when we find them, will we finally understand the civilization that left this field as its silent testimony? Under the relentless sun of western Gujarat, on the island of Kadir in the great Rann of Kutch, lie the sprawling ruins of Dholavira. Amid its massive stone walls, ceremonial grounds, and silent streets, one feature stands out above all: an intricate network of reservoirs, giant rectangular basins carved into bedrock and lined with stone, designed to capture and store the precious monsoon rains. These reservoirs once shimmered with life-giving water, sustaining a city in one of the harshest environments of the Indus Valley Civilization. Today, they are empty, dry, and abandoned, a haunting reminder of a society that mastered water management, only to one day walk away from it all. The scale of Dholavira's hydraulic system is nothing short of astonishing. 13 reservoirs have been identified, some stretching over 70 meters long and 7 meters deep, interconnected by channels, sluices, and spillways. The ingenuity of their construction suggests not only engineering expertise, but also a profound understanding of their environment. These were not mere utilitarian tanks. They were part of a carefully orchestrated system that collected rainwater, diverted seasonal streams, and possibly even filtered impurities. Such mastery over water in a semi-arid landscape would have been the foundation of Dholavira's prosperity. But at some point in the late 3rd millennium BC, this system fell silent. The reservoirs dried, the channels ceased to flow, and the city that had thrived for centuries was gradually abandoned. What happened? The mainstream explanation points to climate change. Around 2000 BC, the monsoons that nourished the region began to weaken, part of a broader pattern of environmental shifts across South Asia. Rivers like the Saraswati dwindled, rainfall became erratic, and agricultural yields likely plummeted. For a city built on the careful harnessing of water, such a change would have been catastrophic. Did the people of Dholavira watch year by year as their lifeline shrank, until survival here was no longer possible? Yet the evidence is not entirely straightforward. Some archaeologists argue that the reservoirs show signs of maintenance even in the city's later phases, suggesting that the inhabitants adapted for a time, finding ways to endure despite declining resources. If so, why did they ultimately leave? Was there a tipping point, a final drought, a social collapse, or something else entirely? The abandonment of Dholavira has also sparked more speculative ideas. Could the city's decline have been linked not solely to climate, but to shifts in trade networks? Dholavira's strategic location connected it to coastal routes and inland markets. If these networks faltered due to changing river courses, competition, or external disruptions, the city's economic foundation might have crumbled alongside its environmental one. Was Dholavira a casualty of both nature and commerce caught in forces beyond its control? Then there are questions that reach beyond the material. Some researchers have suggested that water at Dholavira may have held symbolic as well as practical significance. The sheer prominence of the reservoirs within the city layout, their monumental scale, and the presence of ceremonial structures nearby raise the possibility that water was not just a resource, but a sacred element. Did the drying of these reservoirs carry spiritual weight for the people here, seen not just as an ecological failure, but as a cosmic rupture? Could the decision to abandon the city have been as much a cultural or religious act as a pragmatic one? Walking through Dholavira today, the silence is profound. The reservoir basins gape empty under the sun, their stone walls weathered but unbroken. One can imagine them full again, reflecting the sky, surrounded by the bustle of a living city, children playing at their edges, workers maintaining the channels, elders offering prayers for the rains. And then, one can imagine the end, the water shrinking to stagnant pools, the fields withering, and finally the quiet departure of a people who had once tamed this unforgiving land. What remains unanswered is why they left entirely, rather than adapting as other communities did. Did they scatter to other parts of the Indus world, carrying their knowledge with them? Or did Dholavira's end mark a decisive break, a chapter closed in the story of a civilization whose very resilience could not withstand the forces arrayed against it? The empty reservoirs stand as both a monument to human ingenuity and a riddle of its limits. They show us that the people of the Indus Valley were not passive dwellers in their environment, but active shapers of it, builders who could bend nature to their needs. And yet, they also remind us that even the most sophisticated systems can fail, leaving behind only silence and stone. What truth lies in these dry basins? Was Dholavira's fall inevitable, written in the shifting patterns of climate and trade? Or is there something we have yet to uncover, evidence buried beneath the salt and dust that could reveal why one of the Indus Valley's greatest cities chose to abandon its lifeblood? The question lingers, as stark and enduring as the empty reservoirs themselves, waiting for an answer that may never come. Amid the stark, sun-bleached landscape of Dholavira, where the stones of an ancient city stand in quiet defiance of time, lie a series of structures that continue to baffle archaeologists: the circular platforms. Scattered within the city's lower town, these low, round constructions of stone and mud brick stand out against the otherwise rectangular precision of Indus architecture. They are simple in appearance, flat, elevated discs with carefully laid stones forming their perimeters. But their very presence disrupts our understanding of this meticulously planned urban center. What purpose did these enigmatic platforms serve? Unlike the reservoirs and citadel walls, whose functions can be reasonably deduced, the circular platforms defy easy classification. They do not resemble domestic foundations, storage facilities, or defensive works. Nor do they align with the city's grid-like planning, suggesting they served a distinct, perhaps specialized, role. Excavations around some of these platforms have revealed ash deposits, animal bones, and fragments of pottery, tantalizing clues that hint at activity beyond the mundane. Mainstream interpretations propose that these were ceremonial spaces, possibly linked to communal gatherings, feasts, or rituals involving fire and offerings. The ash and bones could indicate sacrificial practices, perhaps to appease deities, ensure agricultural fertility, or mark seasonal transitions. The circular form itself is significant. Across cultures, circles have long symbolized cycles of life, death, nature, and time. Was this symbolism understood by the people of Dholavira? And were these platforms a physical manifestation of beliefs we can no longer reconstruct? Yet, as with many Indus mysteries, evidence for such interpretations remains circumstantial. Some scholars have urged caution, suggesting the platforms may have served entirely practical purposes, perhaps as bases for large storage bins, granaries, or industrial activities such as dyeing or processing raw materials. The ash deposits, in this view, might simply be the byproducts of work rather than worship. Still, the clustering of platforms in certain parts of the city and their uniformity in construction makes this explanation feel incomplete. More speculative theories venture into broader territory. Some researchers have drawn parallels between these platforms and similar circular structures found in other ancient cultures, such as megalithic ritual sites or early astronomical observatories. Could the platforms of Dholavira have been used to track celestial events, their round shape mirroring the sun and moon? Were they places where the community gathered to mark solstices, equinoxes, or other cosmic rhythms vital to an agrarian society dependent on seasonal cycles? While no direct evidence of astronomical alignment has been conclusively demonstrated, the idea lingers, fueled by the broader enigma of the Indus people's apparent knowledge of timekeeping and measurement. Another line of thought connects the platforms to the city's broader relationship with water. Dholavira's reservoirs and water systems suggest a culture deeply attuned to the rhythms of scarcity and abundance. Some have wondered if the circular platforms might have played a role in rituals dedicated to rain, fertility, or the sanctity of water itself. Could they have been stages where prayers were offered, dances performed, or symbolic acts enacted to ensure the survival of a city surrounded by an unforgiving environment? And yet, the platforms remain silent. No inscriptions accompany them. No carvings or markings explain their purpose. They stand as open-ended questions, challenging us to look beyond the material remains and consider the unseen dimensions of a civilization whose inner life remains largely hidden. Standing at Dholavira today, amid the desolation of the Rann of Kutch, the circular platforms feel almost otherworldly. The wind moves across their surfaces, carrying whispers of a past we cannot fully grasp. Were these places of celebration, where the community came together in moments of joy? Or were they sites of solemn ritual, where firelight flickered against the night and offerings were made to powers beyond human control? Did they witness the city's final days, as the reservoirs dried and the people faced the hard choice to leave? The circular platforms of Dholavira endure as enigmas, humble yet profound, inviting us to imagine a world where practicality and spirituality may have intertwined in ways we struggle to comprehend. What truths lie beneath them, still buried in the soil? Could future excavations reveal artifacts that finally illuminate their function? Or will they forever remain symbols of a mystery that refuses to yield? Like so many features of the Indus Valley Civilization, these platforms remind us of how much we do not know, not only about their technology and society, but about their beliefs, their hopes, and their relationship to the world around them. The stones remain, but the meaning has slipped away. What were these circles of stone to the people of Dholavira? Simple structures, sacred stages, or portals to a way of life that vanished with them? The question hovers in the air, unanswered, as timeless as the platforms themselves, waiting, perhaps, for the day when the earth finally gives up its secrets. In the heart of Mohenjo-Daro and scattered across other Indus Valley sites stand structures that defy not only time, but also full explanation. Massive, cylindrical wells, some plunging over 30 feet deep, lined meticulously with concentric rings of baked brick. Their craftsmanship is astonishing, each brick carefully angled inward, forming a stable, watertight shaft capable of withstanding centuries of pressure. Even today, many remain intact, silent monuments to a people who mastered the manipulation of one of humanity's most essential resources, water. But what were these giant wells truly for? At first glance, their purpose seems obvious. They were wells, sources of fresh water for daily life. The Indus Valley Civilization thrived in regions where seasonal rivers and monsoon rains sustained agriculture, and having reliable water sources during dry months would have been crucial. Archaeological evidence supports this. Some wells are connected to bathing platforms, drains, and household courtyards, suggesting they supplied water for drinking, cleaning, and perhaps ritual ablutions. Yet the sheer scale and distribution of these wells invite deeper questions. Why were some constructed far larger than necessary for domestic use? Why do they appear in clusters, sometimes in proximity to monumental structures, and in patterns that hint at urban planning beyond mere convenience? Could these wells have served functions more complex, more symbolic, than simple utility? Mainstream scholars have long debated their role in urban water management. Some argue that the giant wells acted as reservoirs, part of an elaborate system of collection and distribution that maintained a stable water supply even in times of scarcity. The design of Mohenjo-Daro's wells, often placed at elevated points within the city, suggests they may have fed networks of drains and channels, enabling gravity-based distribution throughout the settlement. If true, this would represent a level of civic engineering unmatched anywhere in the world at that time. But practical explanations, while compelling, may not tell the full story. Certain wells exhibit features that hint at a ritual dimension. Their locations near large public buildings, such as the so-called Great Bath in Mohenjo-Daro, raise the possibility that some wells provided water for ceremonial purposes, purification rituals, offerings, or even community gatherings tied to religious observance. Was water, for the Indus people, more than just sustenance? Was it a sacred element, a medium between the human and the divine? Speculative theories go further still. Some researchers have proposed that these wells might have served as markers of social or administrative order, with access controlled by communal or elite authorities. Others see in their uniform construction a reflection of shared cultural or cosmological values, circular forms representing cycles, continuity, or wholeness. Could the act of drawing water itself have carried symbolic weight, binding the community in a ritual of daily renewal? And then there is the enigma of their longevity. Unlike many ancient urban features, the giant wells were not abandoned as cities declined. Rather, evidence suggests they were maintained and used right up until the very end of the Indus Valley Civilization. When Mohenjo-Daro finally fell silent around 1900 BC, the wells remained, full of silt and debris but structurally sound. Were they among the last functioning elements of a city in decline, sustaining its inhabitants even as trade faltered and streets emptied? Standing at the edge of one of these wells today, looking down into the shadowed depths, it is difficult not to feel a connection to those who once drew water here. Did they sense, as they hauled up each bucket, that their world was changing? Did they see the signs of rivers drying, of monsoons failing, and wonder how long their lifeline would last? Or were these wells, enduring and constant, a source of reassurance, a promise that, no matter what, water would flow? The giant wells of the Indus Valley remain as enduring riddles, testaments to engineering genius and perhaps to beliefs we have yet to comprehend. They remind us that for this ancient civilization, water was not just a necessity but possibly the very foundation of their identity. Were these wells symbols of survival, instruments of worship, or both? What other secrets lie buried in their depths, waiting to be uncovered? Could the sediment within them hold organic remains, pollen, or even artifacts that reveal what role they truly played in daily and spiritual life? Or will they, like so many features of the Indus world, keep their secret forever, guarding a truth that has slipped beyond our reach? As the sun sets over Mohenjo-Daro, casting long shadows across its ruined streets, the wells stand silent, empty of water but full of mystery. They wait, as they have for millennia, inviting us to look deeper, not just into the earth, but into the hidden heart of a civilization that still refuses to fully reveal itself. Beneath the quiet ruins of Mohenjo-Daro, Harappa, and other Indus Valley sites, archaeologists have uncovered a perplexing signature in the earth: thick layers of silt and sediment, sandwiched between the remains of ancient streets and buildings. These flood layers, as they are known, bear silent witness to a past event, or series of events, that may have reshaped the destiny of one of humanity's earliest urban civilizations. Smooth, water-laid deposits cover collapsed walls, pottery fragments, and hearths, as though entire neighborhoods were suddenly buried by rushing waters. But what story do these layers truly tell? The evidence of flooding in the Indus cities has been recognized since the earliest excavations in the 1920s. At Mohenjo-Daro, for example, Sir John Marshall's team noted several distinct flood deposits, one nearly 2 meters thick, suggesting catastrophic inundations over time. Harappa, too, revealed similar patterns: periodic layers of silt interrupting phases of construction, as if the inhabitants repeatedly rebuilt atop the ruins of earlier disasters. These findings have led many to conclude that floods played a significant role in the life, and perhaps the decline, of the Indus Valley Civilization. But the details remain maddeningly elusive. Were these floods the result of the Indus River's natural cycles? Monsoon-swollen torrents overwhelming even the most carefully planned drainage systems? Or were they triggered by something more dramatic? Tectonic activity altering river courses, glacial melt surges, or abrupt climatic shifts? The sheer scale of some deposits has fueled speculation that the region may have experienced sudden, catastrophic events capable of devastating entire urban centers. Mainstream theories emphasize environmental change. Around 2000 BC, the monsoon patterns that had sustained the civilization for centuries began to weaken, while river systems shifted unpredictably. Some scholars suggest that as the Indus River migrated eastward and the once mighty Saraswati dried, cities like Mohenjo-Daro became increasingly vulnerable to both floods and droughts, a cruel paradox of too much water at times and too little at others. Was the civilization's apparent decline then less a single cataclysm and more a long struggle against an environment turning hostile? Yet the flood layers raise questions that simple environmental explanations cannot fully answer. For one, the uniformity of certain deposits suggests episodes of extraordinary magnitude, events so powerful they left a geological scar across multiple sites hundreds of miles apart. Could such floods have been connected, part of a larger regional upheaval? Some researchers have pointed to evidence of tectonic disturbances in the region, proposing that earthquakes may have caused sudden damming and breaching of rivers, unleashing torrents downstream. If true, these floods would not have been predictable seasonal occurrences but devastating shocks, striking without warning. Others entertain more speculative possibilities. Could cultural memory of these floods have survived long after the cities fell silent, echoing in later myths of a great deluge found in traditions from Mesopotamia to India? Were the flood layers of Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa the real-world events behind those enduring legends of waters that once swallowed entire worlds? Adding to the intrigue is the question of how the Indus people responded. The repeated rebuilding of cities atop flood debris suggests resilience, ingenuity, and determination. They raised platforms, reinforced walls, and maintained sophisticated drainage systems, an urban defiance of nature's power. But at what point did adaptation give way to abandonment? Did a final, overwhelming flood break their resolve, or was the accumulation of disasters simply too much to bear? Standing at an excavation trench in Mohenjo-Daro, where archaeologists have carefully peeled back layers of earth to reveal the stark divide between habitation and flood, the silence feels almost oppressive. You can see where a street once bustled with life, only to vanish beneath a thick band of river silt. Above it, new walls rise, evidence of a return, of persistence, and then another layer of silt. And another, a cycle of hope and devastation etched into the ground itself. What, ultimately, do these flood layers represent? Are they the fingerprints of nature's indifference, or the traces of a deeper, more complex story of societal collapse, migration, and transformation? Could future discoveries, perhaps deeper cores drilled beneath these cities, finally reveal the full sequence of events? Or will the floods of the Indus remain forever enigmatic, their causes and consequences lost to the very forces that laid them down? The mysterious flood layers stand as a reminder that even the most advanced civilizations are at the mercy of their environment, and that history's greatest puzzles often lie not in monuments above ground, but in the soil beneath our feet. They whisper of a time when waters rose and cities fell, and they challenge us to ask, how much of the Indus story is still buried, waiting for us to uncover it? In a quiet laboratory far from the arid plains of the Indus Valley, a small human tooth rests beneath the lens of a microscope. At first glance, it seems unremarkable, worn by age, yellowed by time. But under magnification, something extraordinary comes into focus. A series of perfectly drilled holes, each one round, precise, and uniform. This is no accident of nature. This is evidence of a deliberate act. An act performed nearly 9,000 years ago in the settlement of Mehrgarh, long before the rise of Mohenjo-Daro or Harappa, long before most of the world had even conceived of dentistry. The discovery of these drilled teeth stunned archaeologists and anthropologists alike. Found in the burial grounds of Mehrgarh, a site considered a precursor to the Indus Valley Civilization, they revealed that as early as 7000 BC, the people of this region were practicing a form of dental treatment. Tiny holes had been drilled into molars still rooted in human jaws, some showing signs of wear from prolonged use afterward. Clear evidence that these were not post-mortem experiments, but medical interventions performed on the living. How did they do it? The marks on the teeth suggest the use of a bow drill, a tool already known in prehistoric South Asia for crafting beads and other ornaments. But to apply such technology to the human body, without modern instruments, without anesthesia, speaks to a level of ingenuity, and perhaps courage, difficult to fathom. What compelled these early dentists to attempt such procedures? Were they trying to relieve pain from cavities, infections, or abscesses? Or was there a ritual or symbolic dimension to their work, one we can no longer see? Mainstream interpretations point to practicality. Tooth decay would have been a serious problem for Neolithic communities reliant on early agriculture, with diets high in carbohydrates and lacking the dental hygiene of later eras. Drilling into diseased teeth might have been a desperate but effective way to reduce pain, a testament to the resourcefulness of people adapting to new challenges in a changing world. Yet, as always, questions remain. The precision of the drilling, so consistent across multiple specimens, suggests skill and experience. Was there a class of individuals in these communities who specialized in healing, proto-dentists whose knowledge was passed down through generations? If so, what other medical practices might they have known? Did their understanding of the human body extend beyond the mouth into areas of medicine we have yet to uncover? Some researchers have speculated that these dental procedures might have carried spiritual or ritual significance in addition to their practical purpose. In many ancient cultures, the body was not merely biological but symbolic, and acts upon it could hold meaning beyond the physical. Was drilling into a tooth seen as expelling illness or evil spirits? Was the act accompanied by chants, offerings, or other unseen rituals lost to time? The implications of this discovery ripple outward, challenging long-held assumptions about the sophistication of early societies in the region. For decades, the Indus Valley Civilization has been celebrated for its urban planning, trade networks, and undeciphered script. But the evidence from Mehrgar suggests that its roots ran far deeper, that long before the rise of great cities, there were communities experimenting with technology, medicine, and perhaps even holistic understandings of life and health. And yet, so much about this practice remains a mystery. Only a handful of drilled teeth have been found, leaving us to wonder how widespread the technique truly was. Were these rare cases performed only under exceptional circumstances? Or were they part of a broader, now invisible medical tradition? Without written records, we are left with fragments. A tooth here, a tool there. Pieces of a puzzle that refuses to come together. Standing in the burial grounds of Mehrgar, where these ancient individuals once lived and died, it is difficult not to feel a sense of awe. Here, in a world we often imagine as primitive, people were confronting pain with innovation, combining craftsmanship with human need in ways that resonate across millennia. Did they realize they were pioneers of something remarkable? Or was it, to them, simply another task in the ongoing struggle to survive? What else might be waiting beneath the soils of the Indus Valley, waiting to transform our understanding of its people? Could future excavations reveal evidence of surgeries, herbal medicines, or even more advanced medical practices? Or will these drilled teeth remain solitary witnesses to a forgotten chapter of human ingenuity? The evidence of dentistry at Mehrgar whispers of a civilization that was far more complex, far more inventive than we once believed. It is a reminder that even in prehistory, humans were not merely passive in the face of suffering. They acted, experimented, and sought to heal. But beyond that, it leaves us with a question as profound as it is simple. How much of their knowledge has been lost to time, and how much of it still lies buried, waiting for us to uncover? In a glass case in New Delhi's National Museum, under the muted glow of display lights, stands a figure barely 4 inches tall, yet she commands attention as if she were life-sized. Cast in bronze over 4,000 years ago, she depicts a young woman with one hand resting confidently on her hip, the other dangling by her side. Her head tilts slightly upward, her chin lifted, her stance poised and self-assured. She wears a necklace of multiple strands, and on her arms, almost to the shoulders, are dozens of bangles, meticulously rendered by the craftsman's hand. This is the dancing girl of Mohenjo-Daro, one of the most iconic artifacts of the Indus Valley Civilization, and one of its enduring mysteries. The level of skill involved in creating this small statue is astonishing. Using the lost wax casting technique, a method still practiced today, the artisan captured not only the form of a human body, but the essence of attitude, of movement, implied even in stillness. Her limbs are slender, her torso elongated, and though stylized, there is a naturalism to her pose that suggests observation, understanding, and artistic intent. Who was the person immortalized in this tiny sculpture? Was she a real individual, a performer known to her community? Or was she symbolic, an idealized image of youth, grace, or perhaps divine femininity? Mainstream interpretations see the dancing girl as evidence of a society with a rich artistic tradition, one that valued aesthetics and possibly performance arts. The name itself, dancing girl, comes from her pose, which has often been likened to a dancer caught mid-rest, exuding confidence and vitality. Some scholars suggest she reflects the importance of dance and music in the cultural life of the Indus people, an echo of traditions that would later flourish across South Asia. Yet, as with so many Indus artifacts, certainty eludes us. There are no inscriptions to tell us her name, no accompanying context to explain her purpose. She was found not in a temple or palace, but in what appeared to be a private house in Mohenjo-Daro. Was she a cherished possession of a family, a personal talisman, or an object of ritual significance? The bangles she wears have drawn particular attention. They cover her arms in a manner not commonly seen in later South Asian art until much later periods. Were these simply ornaments reflecting the fashion of the time? Or did they carry symbolic weight, marks of status, profession, or spiritual association? The sheer number of them suggests meaning beyond mere decoration, but what that meaning was, we cannot say. Some have speculated that the dancing girl may represent a goddess or a priestess, her confident stance embodying authority or sacred power. Others propose she was part of a set of figurines, perhaps used in ceremonies or storytelling traditions now lost. Could she have been an offering, cast in metal and left as a gift to unseen forces? And then there is the question of what she tells us about gender in the Indus world. Her posture, relaxed yet assertive, has been read by some as evidence of a society where women held significant roles, at least in certain spheres. But without written records, this remains conjecture. Is she a symbol of empowerment, or is that simply a projection of our modern sensibilities onto an artifact from a culture we barely understand? The more speculative theories venture even further. A few researchers have drawn comparisons between the dancing girl and later depictions of celestial dancers in Indian mythology, suggesting she may be an ancestral form of enduring cultural motifs. Others wonder whether her presence in a private residence hints at a domestic cult of beauty, fertility, or prosperity, a belief system carried quietly within the homes of the Indus people rather than displayed in monumental temples. Standing before the dancing girl today, one cannot help but feel the immediacy of her presence. Despite the thousands of years that separate us, there is something profoundly human in her stance, something that transcends time and culture. She does not appear as a relic of a vanished world, but as a living figure, caught in a moment of quiet confidence. And yet, for all her vitality, she remains silent, withholding her story from us. What was her purpose? Was she a dancer, a deity, a symbol of life and youth, or simply a beautiful object crafted for someone's delight? Did she stand in the center of a household altar, inspiring devotion, or was she held in the palm of a child as a treasured toy? The dancing girl of Mohenjo-Daro endures as one of the great enigmas of the Indus Valley, a fragment of a civilization that mastered art, metallurgy, and urban life, but left no voice to explain itself. She invites us to imagine the world that produced her, a world of music, movement, and meaning now lost to time. What other masterpieces of this kind lie buried still, waiting to be uncovered? And when they are, will they bring us closer to understanding or only deepen the mystery? Among the many artifacts unearthed from the ancient cities of the Indus Valley, there is a particular type of object that continues to confound archaeologists. Small, round seals, some scarcely more than an inch in diameter, pierced with a single hole through their center. Known as button seals, these tiny discs are made from steatite, terracotta, and occasionally faience. Their surfaces bear delicate engravings, animals, geometric motifs, and above all, the mysterious Indus script, symbols that remain unreadable to this day. At first glance, they seem functional, almost utilitarian. The central hole suggests they could be strung on cords, perhaps worn as ornaments or attached to goods. Yet their fine craftsmanship and intricate markings imply a purpose beyond mere decoration. What were these objects meant to signify? Were they tools of commerce, tokens of identity, or symbols of something far deeper, belief, status, or power? The most widely accepted interpretation is that button seals served as markers of ownership, much like the square seals also found across Indus sites. These square seals, often bearing elaborate animal motifs like the famous unicorn, were likely pressed into clay to secure shipments or validate transactions. Button seals, however, differ in both form and context. They are smaller, rounder, and more personal in scale, frequently found in domestic settings rather than industrial or administrative areas. Does this indicate a different, perhaps more intimate function? Some scholars suggest they may have been worn as amulets, carrying protective or symbolic meaning for their owners. The engravings on their surfaces, often simple animals like bulls, fish, or birds, might have held spiritual associations, invoking strength, fertility, or guidance. Could the act of wearing or carrying a button seal have been both practical and spiritual, a fusion of identity and belief? Others look to the hole itself for answers. The central perforation might have allowed these seals to be rotated on a cord, presenting different faces depending on how they were worn. Was this intentional, a way to display or conceal certain symbols at will? Or was it purely functional, ensuring the seal could be kept close to its user at all times? Without deciphered inscriptions, we are left to speculate, tracing meaning from form and context alone. More speculative theories reach beyond the personal. Some researchers propose that button seals might have played a role in communal or ritual activities, tokens exchanged during ceremonies, badges of membership in guilds or cults, or even components of games now lost to time. The uniformity of some designs across distant Indus sites hints at shared cultural practices, while the variety of others suggests local variation. Were these little discs the connective tissue of a vast, sophisticated society, carrying messages, values, or identities across hundreds of miles? And then there is the question of their inscriptions. The tiny Indus symbols carved onto many button seals are a riddle within a riddle. Without a bilingual text to unlock their meaning, we can only guess at what they recorded. Were they names, titles, short prayers, or something else entirely? A coding system known only to the initiated. If we could read them, would they reveal a world of trade and law? Or would they open a window onto beliefs and cosmologies we have yet to imagine? Their smallness is deceptive. Holding one in your hand, you are struck by how much care went into such a modest object. Who carved these symbols, painstakingly etching them into stone? Who decided what images to include? And what did the people of the Indus feel when they touched these seals? Pride, reverence, security? Or were they so commonplace in their world that they barely warranted notice, while for us they loom as artifacts of profound mystery? Standing before a display of button seals in a museum today, their significance remains tantalizingly out of reach. They are silent, yet they speak, of a society organized, creative, and deeply interconnected, a society that left behind objects of immense meaning but no clear explanation. What were these button seals to the people who made them? Were they badges of belonging, charms of protection, or signatures of identity in a world without written contracts? Or are we, with all our modern interpretations, missing the truth entirely, failing to see a purpose that to them was obvious but to us is lost? The button seals of the Indus Valley are like whispers from an ancient world, fragments of a language we can no longer hear. Perhaps one day, buried beneath the sands of Harappa or Mohenjo-Daro, a discovery will come, a tablet, a bilingual inscription, a context that reveals their meaning. Until then, they remain what they have always been, small, unassuming, and infinitely mysterious, challenging us to look closer and ask the questions we may never be able to answer. In the ruins of Lothal, beads lie scattered like frozen raindrops of stone and glass, remnants of an industry that once thrummed at the heart of the Indus Valley Civilization. Tiny, perfect spheres of carnelian, agate, shell, and faience, some no larger than a pinhead, testify to a craft so refined it still astonishes modern archaeologists. These were not accidental byproducts of daily life. They were the work of specialized artisans, and their workshops reveal a world of skill, precision, and perhaps deeper meaning. The bead workshops of the Indus Valley were centers of remarkable technological sophistication. Excavations at Lothal, Mohenjo-Daro, and other sites have uncovered evidence of complex manufacturing techniques, drill bits of chert used to bore impossibly small holes, furnaces for heating stones to enhance their color, and debris from sawing, polishing, and finishing processes. Some beads display banded patterns or a lustrous finish achieved through methods that remain only partially understood. How did these ancient craftspeople working with rudimentary tools achieve such consistent excellence? Were their techniques guarded secrets, passed down through generations of artisans? The scale of production suggests that bead making was more than a cottage industry. It was a cornerstone of the Indus economy. Finished beads have been found not only across the Indus Valley, but as far afield as Mesopotamia, Oman, and even Central Asia. The people of Meluha, as the Indus region may have been known to Mesopotamian traders, were clearly part of a vast network of exchange. Did these beads serve as currency, commodities of trade, or symbols of wealth and status in far-off lands? Were they prized for their beauty alone? Or did they carry cultural or spiritual significance that transcended their material form? Mainstream interpretations emphasize their economic role. The standardized shapes and sizes of many beads, along with the use of uniform weights in Indus cities, point to a system of regulated trade. Beads may have functioned as markers of commercial reliability, much like branded goods do today. But this practical explanation leaves other questions unresolved. Why invest so much effort in perfection for objects that might simply be exchanged for goods? What compelled these artisans to create pieces that were not only functional, but undeniably beautiful? Some scholars suggest that beads were deeply symbolic within Indus society itself. The choice of materials, red carnelian, white shell, blue faience, may have held meanings now lost to us. Carnelian, for instance, was associated with vitality in many ancient cultures, while the cool blue of faience often evoked water and life. Could the act of wearing certain beads have signaled identity, belief, or social standing? Were specific combinations of color and form used to communicate unspoken messages within the community? Others speculate on the spiritual dimensions of the craft itself. The meticulous process of shaping raw stone into a perfect polished bead may have carried ritualistic undertones, a transformation of nature into culture, chaos into order. Did the artisans of Lothal and Mohenjo-Daro see themselves as mere workers, or as participants in an act of creation that bridged the human and the divine? And then there is the mystery of the workshop's organization. The spatial layout of some sites suggests centralized production, perhaps overseen by civic authorities or guilds. Were these workshops state-controlled enterprises fueling the wealth of the cities, or independent operations run by families of master craftspeople? The answer could reshape our understanding of the Indus economy and its social structure. Even more intriguing are the unanswered questions surrounding the trade itself. Mesopotamian records speak of ships arriving from distant Meluhha bearing exotic goods, ivory, woods, and beads among them. Did Indus merchants travel those routes themselves, or were their products carried by intermediaries? What did the people of the Indus receive in return, and how did this exchange shape their world? The beads that once adorned kings and queens in far-off lands may have begun their journey in these quiet workshops, crafted by hands whose names are lost but whose skill endures. Standing amid the excavated remains of a bead workshop at Lothal, the silence is almost palpable. Here, long ago, fires once roared in small furnaces, drills spun under the pull of bowstrings, and artisans bent over their work, shaping beauty from stone. Did they talk as they worked, sharing stories and secrets? Did they know that their creations would travel across oceans, linking their city to lands they might never see? Or did they think only of the next bead, the next perfect hole drilled through carnelian? The bead workshops of the Indus Valley are more than archaeological sites. They are windows into the ingenuity, complexity, and humanity of a civilization still shrouded in mystery. What drove this relentless pursuit of precision? Was it commerce, belief, identity, or something that defies our categories entirely? Perhaps buried beneath the layers of earth, there remain tools, records, or even unfinished beads that could answer these questions. Until they are found, the beads themselves must speak for their makers, tiny, enduring voices of a world that excelled in art as much as in survival. And as we hold one in our hand today, smooth and flawless, we cannot help but wonder, what story does this simple object carry from a civilization that continues to elude our full understanding? In the dust of ancient streets long abandoned, among fragments of pottery and beads, archaeologists have uncovered something unexpectedly charming and deeply puzzling. Small clay figurines of animals fitted with wheels. These miniature creatures, bulls, elephants, and other beasts, are no more than a few inches long, their bodies molded by hand with simple but deliberate detail. Each stands on 4 tiny wheels, pierced through with axles so they could roll across the ground. They are silent relics of the Indus Valley Civilization, dating back over 4,000 years, and they whisper of a world that is both familiar and alien. At first glance, they seem like children's toys. The scale, the whimsical forms, the functional wheels, all evoke images of a child pulling a clay bull along a dirt courtyard, laughter mingling with the sounds of a bustling city. It is a vision that humanizes the Indus world, reminding us that these were not only builders of cities and traders across oceans, but families with lives rich in ordinary joys. Could these wheeled animals have been the playthings of Indus children, evidence of a simple, universal impulse to create and to amuse? Yet, as with so much of the Indus legacy, deeper questions soon emerge. Many of these figurines were not found in domestic contexts, but in more formal settings, burial sites, ceremonial areas, and sometimes clustered with other symbolic objects. Were they truly toys, or did they serve a more profound purpose? Some scholars propose that these objects might have been ritual offerings, their wheels symbolizing movement, fertility, or cycles of nature. The bull, a frequent subject among these figurines, was an animal of immense economic and symbolic importance in the Indus world, associated with agriculture, strength, and possibly reverence. Was the act of creating a wheeled bull an invocation of prosperity, a tangible prayer for abundance in the fields? Others consider the technological implications. The presence of wheeled objects in the Indus Valley, especially so early in history, suggests familiarity with the concept of wheeled transport, while full-sized carts and chariots from this period remain elusive. The miniature models demonstrate an understanding of axles and rolling mechanisms. Were these figurines simply educational tools, teaching children about carts and draft animals? Or were they symbolic representations of technologies crucial to trade and survival? The mystery deepens when we examine their distribution. Wheeled animal figurines have been found across multiple Indus sites, from Harappa to Mohenjo-Daro, suggesting that their production and use were widespread. Were they part of a shared cultural practice, a common ritual, a standard type of toy, or something else entirely? Their persistence across centuries hints at significance beyond mere play. And then there are the speculative theories, intriguing if unprovable. Some researchers have suggested that these figurines might represent miniature offerings in processions, perhaps used in ceremonies where real animals or carts were impractical. Others see in them echoes of a symbolic cosmology where movement, of the sun, of the seasons, of life itself, was central, and where these wheeled creatures embodied that eternal motion. Could it be that what looks to us like a toy was, to them, a sacred object, an artifact of belief disguised in simplicity? Standing in a museum today, holding one of these clay animals under protective glass, one is struck by its dual nature. It is humble, almost playful, and yet imbued with a sense of purpose. The wheels, though primitive, turn smoothly even now, as if waiting to be set in motion once again. Who last touched this figurine in its original context? Was it a child, tugging it along behind them? A craftsman, finishing it with pride? Or a priest, placing it in a grave or shrine as an offering to unseen forces? The wheeled animal figurines of the Indus Valley defy easy categorization. They are objects of function and mystery, of daily life and possible ritual, of technology and imagination. They remind us that the people of this ancient civilization were not just practical urban planners, but also creators of symbols, objects that carried meaning we can no longer read. What, ultimately, did these rolling creatures represent to those who made them? Were they the innocent toys of a thriving city's children, or were they talismans of prosperity and cycles, linked to beliefs that shaped an entire culture? Perhaps they were both, and more, a bridge between the mundane and the sacred, between work and play, between the visible world and the unseen. As the wind sweeps across the silent ruins of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, it is easy to imagine one of these little figures bumping along a dirt road thousands of years ago, its wheels turning in the dust of a world long vanished. What stories do they carry, locked within their clay bodies? And how many more of their kind still lie buried, waiting to remind us that even in the most enigmatic civilizations, there was life, complex, inventive, and full of mysteries yet to be understood? Across the excavated ruins of the Indus Valley, from Harappa to Mohenjo-Daro to distant Lothal, a recurring theme emerges in the artifacts left behind. Animals. They appear everywhere, engraved on steatite seals, painted on pottery, molded into terracotta figurines, and carved into tiny amulets. Bulls with curved horns, majestic elephants, tigers mid-prowl, rhinoceroses with thick hides, fish with elegantly curved tails, and, most famously, the enigmatic unicorn, a single-horned creature depicted on hundreds of seals. These motifs are not random decoration. They are deliberate, repeated, and deeply symbolic. But what did they mean to the people who created them? On the square seals, animals are often depicted with a remarkable attention to detail and stylization. The unicorn, for instance, stands before a mysterious object, sometimes interpreted as a ceremonial stand or a feeding trough, while script-like symbols hover above it. The humped bull, another common motif, is rendered with powerful shoulders and forward-facing horns, suggesting strength and virility. Elephants appear in profile, their sheer size emphasized by the curve of their trunks, while tigers are shown with stripes etched into their bodies. To modern eyes, these are simply animals. To the Indus people, they may have carried layers of meaning we can scarcely imagine. Mainstream interpretations suggest that these motifs were markers of identity, perhaps clan symbols, merchant emblems, or indicators of profession. The seals, used to stamp goods and secure trade, may have functioned like signatures, with each animal representing a family, guild, or settlement. This utilitarian view fits neatly into the narrative of the Indus as a mercantile civilization, connected to far-off lands through networks of commerce. But does it explain the sheer variety and consistency of these images across such a vast area? Some scholars argue that the animals had spiritual or religious significance. In many cultures, animals embody qualities admired or feared by humans: strength, fertility, cunning, wisdom, and are often associated with deities or cosmological concepts. Was the unicorn a sacred creature, a symbol of prosperity or divine favor? Was the bull linked to agricultural fertility, the tiger to protection, the fish to water and abundance? If so, the seals might have served not just as practical tools but as talismans, imbuing the goods they marked with blessings or protection. The unicorn, in particular, has sparked intense debate. No such animal existed in the region, leading some to wonder if it was purely mythical, or perhaps a stylized depiction of a real creature, such as an aurochs or an antelope shown in profile. Its prevalence, far surpassing other motifs, suggests it held special importance. Was it the emblem of a dominant cult, a ruling class, or a central belief system? Or does its very mystery indicate a symbolic meaning now lost, one that might rewrite our understanding of Indus spirituality if only we could decipher it? More speculative theories reach even further. Some researchers see in the animal motifs echoes of a proto-zodiac or an early symbolic language, where animals conveyed concepts, events, or cosmological cycles. Others propose that the seals were part of ritual exchange systems, their imagery tied to seasonal ceremonies or mythic narratives shared across the civilization. Could these creatures have been characters in stories that united the Indus world? Stories now vanished, their only surviving traces these silent images. Adding to the puzzle is the absence of clear monumental depictions of gods or kings in Indus culture. Unlike Mesopotamia or Egypt, the Indus left no towering statues of rulers or pantheons of deities carved in stone. Instead, we have these animals, modest in scale but omnipresent. Did the people of the Indus find divinity in nature itself, rather than in human figures? Were these motifs a reflection of a worldview where animals were not separate from humanity, but integral to its spiritual and material existence? Walking through the museums that house these artifacts, one is struck by their quiet power. A seal barely 2 inches wide can evoke a world of meaning. A bull poised in strength, a tiger frozen mid-stride, a unicorn standing before a cryptic object. They are simple, yet they speak of sophistication, a symbolic system shared across a civilization that spanned hundreds of miles and endured for centuries. And yet, they remain mute. Without the key to the Indus script, we cannot know what words accompanied these images, what ideas they conveyed, or what beliefs they embodied. We are left with fragments of a language of symbols, one that hints at complexity and unity, but refuses to reveal its secrets. What do these animal motifs truly represent? Were they badges of trade, emblems of faith, or pieces of a symbolic code that bound a civilization together? Are we glimpsing the sacred through their forms, or merely projecting meaning onto patterns we do not understand? The animals of the Indus Valley endure as silent messengers from a lost world, their images etched into stone thousands of years ago, carrying significance that has outlived its context. Perhaps, buried still beneath the ancient cities, there lies a tablet, a mural, or a single artifact that will unlock their meaning. Until then, these creatures, real and imagined, stand as enduring symbols of a civilization whose mysteries continue to challenge and captivate us. Amid the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, where streets of baked brick stretch in precise geometric order, one might expect to find the remnants of conflict, swords, shields, arrowheads, or the charred ruins of fortifications. Yet in these vast urban landscapes, artifacts of war are conspicuously scarce. The cities of the Indus Valley Civilization, which thrived between 2600 and 1900 BC, appear almost devoid of the instruments of organized violence that are common in other ancient societies. This absence is as perplexing as it is profound. What kind of civilization could rise to such heights without leaving behind a legacy of weaponry? To be sure, a few objects hint at martial potential. Small copper spearheads, arrow points, and stone slings have been uncovered, but their numbers are minuscule compared to the thousands of tools, beads, and household items that dominate the archaeological record. More tellingly, there is little evidence of large-scale warfare, no mass graves from battles, no fortresses built for defense, no depictions of kings in triumph or enemies in defeat. Instead, we find cities planned with careful attention to sanitation, storage, and trade, as if collective prosperity, not conquest, was their guiding principle. Mainstream explanations often cite geography and economy. The Indus Valley, rich in agricultural land and crisscrossed by trade routes, may have fostered cooperation over conflict. Its extensive networks of exchange with Mesopotamia, Central Asia, and the Persian Gulf suggest a society oriented toward commerce rather than conquest. Perhaps their cities were so well planned, their resources so abundant, that they had little need for militarization. But can any civilization of this scale truly have thrived without organized warfare? Some scholars argue that the absence of weapons might reflect a different kind of social structure, one less hierarchical, less dominated by warrior elites. Unlike Mesopotamia's towering ziggurats or Egypt's colossal statues of pharaohs, the Indus left no grand monuments to rulers or gods. Could it be that their society operated on principles of collective governance, where power was diffused and conflict minimized? Or are we simply missing the evidence, lost to time, or hidden beneath layers yet to be unearthed? More speculative theories offer alternative perspectives. Some suggest that the Indus people may have practiced forms of conflict resolution we cannot now discern: diplomacy, trade agreements, or alliances that left no physical trace. Others wonder whether weapons existed primarily in perishable forms: wood, leather, or other materials that have not survived the millennia. Still others propose that the absence of martial artifacts could indicate a cultural ethos that deliberately avoided glorifying war, leaving behind no monumental records of violence, even if it occurred. There is also the enduring question of their decline. If this was indeed a peaceful civilization, what happened when external pressures mounted? Climatic shifts, river changes, or incursions from migrating groups? Did their lack of militarization make them vulnerable, contributing to the eventual abandonment of their cities? Or did they transform, assimilating into emerging cultures without the violent upheavals that marked the end of other great civilizations? Walking through the excavated streets of Mohenjo-Daro today, the silence of this mystery is palpable. You see granaries that once stored the lifeblood of the city, drainage systems that carried away its waste, and homes that sheltered its people, but no signs of walls meant to repel invaders, no armories stocked for defense. Did they live in rare harmony, shielded by geography and mutual interest? Or is this an illusion, a misinterpretation born of what has yet to be found? The absence of weapons in the Indus Valley Civilization forces us to reconsider what we think we know about the ancient world. Was power always tied to violence? Or can a complex society endure on foundations of cooperation and trade? Are we witnessing a true anomaly in human history, a great civilization built without war? Or simply confronting the limits of our own evidence? What truths lie buried still, waiting to reshape this narrative? Will future excavations uncover hidden caches of arms, revealing a martial reality beneath the veneer of peace? Or will the silence of the Indus endure, a testament to a society that defies our expectations and refuses to fit neatly into the patterns of history we have come to expect? In the museums that house the artifacts of the Indus Valley Civilization, visitors can peer into glass cases filled with objects from a world that thrived over 4,000 years ago. Finely carved seals bearing mysterious animals, elegant pottery with geometric designs, intricate beads of carnelian and faience, and small bronze and terracotta figurines. Yet among these thousands of items, one thing is strikingly absent. There are no depictions of battle, no carved scenes of warriors, no triumphal monuments, no images of kings smiting enemies, no processions of soldiers or conquests immortalized in stone. For a civilization as vast and sophisticated as the Indus, spanning hundreds of miles and sustaining large urban centers like Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, and Dholavira, this silence on the subject of war is as puzzling as it is profound. Other ancient cultures left behind unmistakable evidence of conflict. In Mesopotamia, we find stelae carved with scenes of victory, such as the stele of Naram-Sin, depicting an Akkadian king crushing his foes. In Egypt, temple walls are covered with images of pharaohs in battle, smiting captives beneath their chariots. Even in smaller contemporary societies, weapons and warrior imagery are common, glorifying the act of war and the power it conveys. The Indus Valley, by contrast, offers no such imagery. Their seals and artifacts depict animals, abstract symbols, and perhaps deities, but not war. Why? Mainstream scholars have offered several explanations. One possibility is that the Indus people did not emphasize warfare in their cultural or political life. The lack of fortifications in many cities, the scarcity of weapons, and the absence of elite warrior burials support the idea that this was a society that prioritized trade, agriculture, and civic order over conquest and military dominance. Could it be that they operated under a different model of civilization altogether, one that did not rely on violence as a central organizing principle? Alternatively, some researchers suggest that the lack of martial imagery may reflect cultural values rather than actual conditions. Perhaps conflict did occur, but the Indus people chose not to record it, or at least not in ways we can recognize. Was there a deliberate cultural aversion to depicting violence, an ethos that celebrated harmony and productivity rather than destruction? If so, what does that say about their worldview, and how unique was it in the ancient world? There is also the possibility that we are simply missing the evidence. Much of the Indus material culture was made of perishable materials, wood, cloth, and perhaps painted surfaces that have long since vanished. Could depictions of war once have existed in forms that have not survived? Or are they still buried, hidden beneath layers of earth in sites not yet uncovered? Speculative theories extend even further. Some have argued that the absence of martial imagery hints at a fundamentally different kind of social structure, one without centralized kingship, standing armies, or the constant assertion of dominance through violence. The lack of royal propaganda in any form, no statues of rulers, no inscriptions boasting of their deeds, suggests that power in the Indus world may have been collective, decentralized, or tied to economic and religious institutions rather than military force? Could this have been a society where cooperation, rather than coercion, was the glue that held cities together? Or are we romanticizing a culture we barely understand, projecting ideals of peace onto evidence that is simply incomplete? The most provocative question of all is what this absence means for the civilization's ultimate fate. When the Indus cities began to decline around 1900 BC, was it because they lacked the martial capabilities to defend themselves against external threats? Or did their disappearance come not through violent conquest, but through environmental collapse, river shifts, and gradual migration? An end as enigmatic and understated as their material record. Standing in the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro, one can almost feel this silence. The streets are broad and orderly, the drains meticulously engineered, the houses carefully aligned. There are no walls adorned with scenes of kings or conquests, no monuments to victories long past. Only the quiet endurance of a people whose story remains untold. Did they see war as unnecessary, as wasteful, as unworthy of commemoration? Or did they fight and die like all other civilizations, their struggles lost to time and the elements? The lack of depictions of war in the Indus Valley Civilization is not just an archaeological puzzle, it is a philosophical one. It forces us to confront our assumptions about what it means to be civilized. Must complex societies always be built on violence, or can they thrive without it? Are we witnessing here a rare example of a culture that chose a different path, or merely the remnants of a narrative that has eroded away? What truths still lie buried beneath the sands of Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, and Dholavira? Will we one day uncover a mural or artifact that rewrites this story entirely, revealing a history of conflict hidden from view? Or will the Indus remain forever silent on the subject of war, leaving us to wonder whether their greatest mystery is not how they lived, but how they managed to endure without celebrating, or perhaps even needing, the violence that so defined other ancient worlds? In the ruins of Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, and Dholavira, where walls crumble and streets lie silent, one detail remains remarkably consistent, a pattern etched into the very fabric of the civilization. The bricks that built these cities, though now worn and sun-baked, share a near-uniform proportion, a length-to-width to height ratio of 4:1. From the smallest houses to the grandest public baths, from warehouses to city walls, this precise ratio persists across hundreds of miles and centuries of occupation. It is a standardization so deliberate, so widespread, that it demands explanation. To modern archaeologists, this consistency is astonishing. In a world without mass communication, without centralized states as we understand them, how did cities separated by vast distances adhere to the same construction norms? These were not isolated settlements. They were part of a vast cultural expanse stretching from present-day Afghanistan to western India. Yet whether a brick was made in Mohenjo-Daro around 2600 BC or in Harappa a century later, it would likely conform to the same proportion. Was this simply practicality, the product of builders finding the most efficient shape for stacking and stability? Or evidence of something deeper, a shared system of knowledge, authority, or belief binding the Indus world together? Mainstream explanations point to engineering logic. A 4:1 brick ratio provides optimal strength for load-bearing structures and works seamlessly for modular construction. It allows walls to be laid with uniformity, ensuring durability and ease of repair. In a civilization renowned for its urban planning, grid-patterned streets, advanced drainage systems, standardized weights, it is tempting to see standardized bricks as just another facet of their pragmatic genius. But is that all it was? Some scholars have suggested that such widespread standardization implies a level of coordination that challenges our current understanding of Indus society. Without evidence of centralized rulers, royal decrees, or a unifying state apparatus, How was this achieved? Did a network of guilds or master builders enforce these norms? Or did the knowledge travel organically through shared traditions and training, passed from one generation to the next across cities that were culturally intertwined? Others take a more speculative view, seeing in the bricks a possible reflection of cosmological or symbolic order. The ratio itself, 4:1, has been linked by some researchers to harmonic proportions found in nature, music, and even later Vedic rituals. Could it be that the Indus people imbued their architecture with meaning beyond the material, embedding a sense of balance and harmony into the very dimensions of their cities? Were their walls not only functional but also spiritual, aligned with principles we can no longer perceive? The question becomes even more intriguing when we consider what happened later. After around 1900 BC, as the Indus cities declined, the standardized brick ratio begins to disappear. Later cultures in the region used bricks of varying proportions, less precise and more irregular. Was this simply the result of social collapse and decentralization, or does it mark the loss of a guiding principle, a shared understanding that once held the Indus world together? Did the crumbling of this standard symbolize more than the physical fall of cities? Perhaps the unraveling of a worldview? Walking through the remains of Mohenjo-Daro, one can still see the legacy of these bricks in the orderly lines of the Great Bath, the sturdy platforms of granaries, and the carefully laid walls of homes. Each brick, though silent, seems to carry the weight of a civilization's intent, a collective decision to build not just structures, but order itself. Who decided on these proportions? Was there a moment, long ago, when a group of builders agreed upon this standard, not knowing it would define their cities for centuries? Or was it older still, inherited from traditions that predate the Indus civilization itself? The standardized bricks of the Indus Valley are more than a technical curiosity. They are a window into the nature of a society that left behind no kings, no conquests, no grand monuments proclaiming its glory, only the quiet, enduring evidence of precision and consistency. What kind of culture chooses such a legacy? And what does it say about their priorities, their values, and their sense of the world? Could there be deeper meanings hidden in these ratios, connections we have yet to uncover between their architecture, their undeciphered script, and their way of life? Or are we searching for patterns where there were none, projecting significance onto a choice that was simply practical? The bricks remain, stacked in rows that have weathered millennia, their proportions intact even as the civilization that made them vanished. They are, perhaps, the most enduring testimony of the Indus Valley, unassuming yet profoundly enigmatic. What secrets might still lie in the mathematical order of their dimensions, waiting to be revealed by a discovery yet to come? And when that discovery comes, will it confirm what we think we know, or open doors to mysteries we cannot yet imagine? Rising above the plains of the Indus Valley, the remnants of elevated platforms still mark the silhouettes of ancient cities, massive brick structures that once formed the fortified citadels of Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, Dholavira, and Kalibangan. Even in ruin, they dominate their surroundings, broad mounds of baked earth and stone that speak of deliberate, monumental effort. Standing at their base, one cannot help but imagine their former grandeur, towering walls, imposing gateways, and a commanding presence over the city below. What purpose did these citadels serve, and what stories do they hold about the civilization that built them? The citadels were no small undertakings. Built on elevated platforms, often reinforced with retaining walls of baked brick, they appear to have been central features of Indus urban design. Within their bounds, archaeologists have discovered large granaries, public baths, craft workshops, and administrative buildings. Unlike the palaces of Mesopotamia or the temples of Egypt, however, these citadels lack overt signs of royal authority or divine imagery. There are no inscriptions proclaiming the deeds of kings, no statues of deities presiding over their walls. Instead, the structures are functional, austere, and enigmatic. Mainstream interpretations suggest that the citadels were hubs of civic life, administrative centers where resources were managed, goods stored, and rituals performed. Their elevation may have served practical purposes, protecting key facilities from floods in a region prone to seasonal inundation. Yet their sheer size and prominence invite speculation. Were these citadels purely utilitarian, or did they hold symbolic or social significance beyond what their remains suggest? Some scholars see in them evidence of a stratified society. The raised platforms could have physically and socially separated the inhabitants of the citadel from those of the lower city, indicating a hierarchy of power or privilege. Were these the seats of an elite class, administrators, merchants, or priestly figures who oversaw the functioning of the city from above? If so, why do we find so little material evidence of their wealth or status compared to other ancient civilizations? Could it be that power in the Indus world was exercised differently, less ostentatiously, more communally, or in ways that have left few archaeological traces? Others propose that the citadels had a ritual or ceremonial function. The presence of the Great Bath at Mohenjo-Daro, situated atop its citadel mound, suggests that water-based rites may have played a central role in civic life. Were these citadels sacred precincts, places where the spiritual and administrative realms converged? Did their walls enclose not just stores of grain, but also the intangible wealth of a society's beliefs and traditions? More speculative theories push further. Some have wondered whether the citadels were designed with defense in mind, despite the scarcity of weapons or evidence of warfare. Their massive walls and strategic placement suggest the potential for fortification. Were they built in anticipation of threats that never materialized, or do they reflect a kind of preparedness that we have yet to fully understand? Alternatively, were they not fortresses against human enemies at all, but bulwarks against the environment? Structures meant to withstand floods, earthquakes, or other natural forces that shaped life in the Indus Valley? And then there is the question of coordination. The citadels of distant cities share common features: elevated platforms, similar construction techniques, and comparable layouts. This uniformity across such a vast area hints at a shared vision, a cultural blueprint guiding urban development. Who conceived this vision? Was there a central authority coordinating these designs, or was it the product of a network of communities bound by shared knowledge and tradition? Standing atop the citadel mound of Mohenjo-Daro today, the view stretches over a landscape of crumbling walls and open courtyards. Below lies the lower city, its grid of streets still discernible despite the millennia. From here, one senses the weight of purpose in this place. It was more than just a raised platform. It was the heart of a civilization, its most visible statement of permanence and order. Yet the citadels remain mute on the questions we most wish to answer. Were they seats of power, sanctuaries of faith, or bastions of survival? Did they symbolize unity or division, resilience or control? And why, when the Indus cities eventually declined, were these monumental structures left behind, abandoned to the wind and sand? The fortified citadels of the Indus Valley endure as enduring enigmas, testaments to a people who built with precision and purpose, but who left no clear record of their intentions. What truths might still lie beneath their foundations, waiting to reveal the story of a civilization that rose, flourished, and vanished without a definitive trace? And when we finally uncover those truths, will they confirm what we suspect, or lead us to entirely new mysteries about the world they once ruled from these silent heights? In the shadow of the citadels, where the winds of millennia sweep over deserted streets, archaeologists have uncovered something that hints at a more enigmatic side of the Indus Valley Civilization. The remains of animals carefully placed in specific patterns, sometimes in association with hearths, altars, or enclosures. At Kalibangan, in particular, excavations revealed a series of fire altars, rectangular pits lined with clay, near which were found the bones of cattle, goats, and other domesticated animals. Their arrangement was not haphazard. It suggested deliberate placement, perhaps even ritual. What were these ancient people doing here? Were these the traces of offerings to unseen powers, or simply the remnants of communal feasts? To understand the weight of this discovery, one must picture the scene as it might have been nearly 4,000 years ago. Fires blazing in clay-lined pits, smoke rising into the sky, the lowing of animals brought into the enclosure, and the solemn actions of participants whose faces we can no longer see. Were they invoking fertility for their fields, protection for their herds, or favor from deities whose names are forever lost? Or were they, as some argue, merely cooking for gatherings, the ritual context a projection of our own curiosity onto ordinary acts? Mainstream interpretations remain cautious. Some scholars see in these findings evidence of ritual sacrifice, aligning them with practices known from later Vedic traditions, where offerings to gods often involved fire and the symbolic use of animals. The parallel is tempting, yet problematic. The Indus script remains undeciphered, and without written accounts, any connection between these practices and later cultural traditions is speculative at best. Are we witnessing the precursors of beliefs that would shape the subcontinent for millennia? Or are these entirely unrelated practices that vanished with the civilization itself? Other researchers favor more utilitarian explanations. They argue that the so-called altars could have been simple hearths for domestic use or communal feasting areas. The presence of animal bones, in this view, reflects butchering and consumption rather than sacred ritual. But then, why the repetition of such structures in planned, organized patterns within certain areas of sites like Kalibangan? Why build them with such care if they were merely for cooking? There are, too, the more speculative ideas, those that peer into the possibility of a symbolic or cosmological worldview embedded in these acts. Could the sacrifices, if they were sacrifices, have been part of agricultural rites, binding the cycles of life, death, and rebirth into the fabric of society? The bull, frequently depicted on Indus seals, is a powerful symbol of strength and fertility. Did the offering of such animals embody a covenant between humans and the forces of nature they depended upon? Was the fire itself not just a tool, but a sacred medium carrying prayers and promises skyward? And yet, the evidence refuses to resolve into certainty. No inscriptions accompany these altars, no carvings depict the rituals, no myths survive to illuminate their meaning. We are left with bones and bricks, ashes and conjecture. The silence of the Indus Valley is perhaps most profound here, in the gap between what we see and what we understand. Walking among the excavated fire altars of Kalibangan today, one can almost feel the weight of these unanswered questions. The clay-lined pits are empty now, their flames long extinguished, but they hold an atmosphere of purpose. What compelled those ancient people to gather here, to light these fires, to place these animals just so? Was it an act of devotion, of necessity, or of something we cannot yet imagine? The evidence of possible animal sacrifice in the Indus Valley invites us to confront the limits of archaeology. We can measure bones, analyze soil, and reconstruct structures, but can we ever truly grasp the beliefs and intentions behind them? Did these acts reflect a society rooted in reverence for life's cycles, or were they pragmatic responses to survival in a challenging environment? And perhaps the most haunting question of all, what else remains buried beneath the earth? Ritual sites undiscovered, artifacts that could tip the balance of interpretation one way or another. Will the sands of the Indus one day yield a definitive answer, or will they continue to guard the secret of whether these fires once burned for gods, for people, or for something beyond both? In the ruins of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, among layers of earth that have lain undisturbed for thousands of years, archaeologists have unearthed objects so small they can fit neatly in the palm of a hand. These are the tiny Steatite seals of the Indus Valley Civilization, delicately carved squares of soft stone, often less than 2 inches across. Despite their modest size, they carry an outsized significance, for inscribed upon their surfaces are some of the most enduring mysteries of the ancient world. Each seal bears intricate imagery, animals rendered with striking precision, bulls with curved horns, tigers with etched stripes, elephants with raised trunks, and, most puzzling of all, the so-called unicorn, a one-horned creature unknown to nature. Above these figures runs a line of symbols, the enigmatic Indus script, a writing system that remains undeciphered to this day. The combination of image and inscription is so consistent, so deliberate, that it seems to demand meaning. Yet what that meaning was remains hidden. Mainstream interpretations suggest these seals were practical tools of trade and administration. The raised designs could be pressed into wet clay to mark goods, authenticate shipments, or signify ownership, an ancient equivalent of a signature or company logo. The discovery of similar seals at sites far beyond the Indus Valley, including Mesopotamia, supports the idea that they were part of a vast commercial network. But even this seemingly straightforward explanation raises questions. If these were simply functional objects, why invest such artistry in their creation? Why adorn them with complex symbols whose language we cannot read? And why include animals that may have held deep cultural significance? Some scholars see in the seals a window into the spiritual or ideological world of the Indus people. The repeated use of certain animals, especially the unicorn, has led to speculation that they represented deities, totemic emblems, or mythological beings. Could the act of stamping a seal have been more than a bureaucratic necessity? Was it a ritual act, invoking protection or prosperity for the goods it marked? Were the symbols above the animals prayers, names, or invocations of forces beyond human control? The unicorn itself remains one of the great enigmas of ancient iconography. Depicted with a long, curved horn and often positioned before a mysterious object resembling an altar or stand, it dominates the corpus of Indus seals, appearing more frequently than any other motif. What did it represent to the people who carved it over and over again? Was it a mythical creature embodying ideals of purity or strength? Was it a symbolic abstraction of a real animal, like an aurochs shown in profile? Or was it the emblem of a powerful lineage or cult whose influence spanned the civilization? More speculative theories propose that the seals might have served as more than tools of commerce or symbols of belief. They may have been keys to a broader system of communication or control. Some researchers have suggested they could represent a proto-bureaucratic code, with each combination of animal and inscription corresponding to complex information, perhaps ownership, origin, quality, or even ritual status. Others go further, imagining the seals as pieces of a symbolic language we have yet to decode, a language that could reveal the inner workings of a civilization that left behind no deciphered texts, no epic inscriptions, no chronicles of kings. And still, the mystery deepens. Despite decades of effort, the Indus script remains unreadable. Its brevity, most inscriptions are fewer than 5 characters long, has frustrated attempts to unlock its secrets. Without a bilingual Rosetta Stone, we can only guess at what these seals say. Are they names, numbers, sacred words? Or are we, in our desire to find complexity, overlooking something far simpler? Standing before a display of these seals in a museum today, one is struck by their quiet power. They are small, unassuming, yet meticulously crafted, each line etched by a steady hand thousands of years ago. Who made them? Who used them? What thoughts and beliefs did they carry into the world? They are not grand monuments or sweeping inscriptions, but they endure as some of the most evocative artifacts of the Indus Valley, silent messengers from a society that spoke in symbols we can no longer understand. What truths lie locked within these tiny stones? If we could read their script, would they reveal the inner life of the Indus world, its gods, its rulers, its laws? Or would they surprise us entirely, showing a civilization that thought and organized in ways unlike any we have known? And how many more of these seals still lie buried, waiting to be found, each one a potential key to unlocking a past that refuses to give up its secrets? The tiny steatite seals of the Indus Valley remain one of the most tantalizing mysteries of the ancient world, compact, cryptic, and profoundly human. They challenge us to look closer, to question what we think we know, and to wonder what stories are waiting, silently, to be told. Amid the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro, Harappa, and Dholavira, one might expect to find monuments celebrating kings, towering statues proclaiming their power, inscriptions boasting of conquests, or reliefs depicting rulers in divine communion with gods. Yet, in the vast archaeological record of the Indus Valley Civilization, such depictions are strikingly absent. There are no colossal stone figures, no glorified battles etched in relief, no palaces that speak of an unquestioned ruler's dominance. Instead, we find orderly streets, standardized bricks, uniform weights, and efficient drainage systems, a picture of a society that was undeniably complex, but curiously faceless in its leadership. One of the few artifacts that has been speculatively linked to authority is the so-called Priest King statue from Mohenjo-Daro, a small, finely carved steatite figure with a neatly trimmed beard, a fillet around his head, and a patterned robe draped across his shoulder. He gazes forward with an expression of calm detachment, dignified yet strangely impersonal. Was he truly a ruler, as early excavators believed, or simply a figure of religious or cultural significance? The statue offers no clear answers, no inscription to declare his identity, no context to define his role. He remains one of the very few human representations of prominence from an entire civilization, and even he is an enigma. This absence of identifiable rulers sets the Indus Valley apart from its contemporaries. In Mesopotamia, rulers like Hammurabi and Sargon immortalized themselves in stone. In Egypt, the pyramids themselves served as eternal monuments to pharaohs whose names and deeds we still know. Even smaller cultures left behind seals or stelae naming their leaders. Why, then, did the Indus people, with their sophisticated urban centers and far-reaching trade networks, leave no such evidence? Mainstream interpretations suggest that political power in the Indus Valley may have been organized differently, less centralized, more communal. Perhaps governance was conducted by councils, merchant elites, or local assemblies rather than by singular kings. The uniformity of urban planning across sites, shared standards in construction, weights, and measures, might reflect collective decision-making rather than the directives of a single monarch. Could this have been a society where authority was diffused, where power lay in systems rather than individuals? Others wonder whether we are simply overlooking the signs of rulership because they do not match our expectations. Without deciphered texts, we cannot know what titles or offices existed, or how leadership was conceptualized. Perhaps rulers were deliberately understated, their authority embedded in ritual, religion, or bureaucracy rather than ostentatious displays of wealth and power. Did they lead through consensus, through sacred duty, or through mechanisms invisible to the archaeological record? More speculative theories push further. Some researchers propose that the absence of ruler depictions could indicate a society that consciously avoided personal glorification, valuing collective identity over individual ambition. Was this an intentional cultural choice, a rejection of the ego-driven monuments that defined other ancient civilizations? Or, conversely, is it possible that we simply have not found their monuments yet? That somewhere, buried deep beneath layers of earth, lies the evidence of kings and queens whose names are waiting to be rediscovered? This mystery also raises questions about the very nature of civilization itself. Must complex societies always revolve around charismatic leaders and hierarchical dominance? Or can they, as the Indus might suggest, function through cooperation, shared standards, and distributed power? If so, what might this tell us about the possibilities of human organization, past and future? Standing amid the silent streets of Mohenjo-Daro, the absence of rulers feels almost palpable. There is no palace towering over the city, no throne room to anchor its political life. Instead, the city's grandeur lies in its collective achievement: straight streets, efficient water management, public baths, and granaries, all the hallmarks of a society that thrived without leaving behind a single named leader. Who guided these efforts? Who decided the dimensions of the bricks, the alignment of the streets, the standards of trade? Were they anonymous visionaries, or was the vision itself shared by an entire culture? The lack of clear ruler depictions in the Indus Valley Civilization forces us to confront a paradox. We see the results of immense coordination, yet we cannot find the coordinators. It is as though the civilization chose to speak not through the voices of individuals, but through the harmony of its cities. What secrets lie still buried in these ancient mounds? Will future discoveries reveal the faces and names of rulers, rewriting our understanding of the Indus as a society of hidden kings? Or will the silence endure, leaving us with the haunting possibility that one of humanity's greatest civilizations thrived without a crown at all?